Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this evening's Scrutiny Commission meeting. I am Caroline Culver, Chairman of Scrutiny Commission. Members of the Commission present this evening are Councillors Anthony Amatharaj, Dominic Bowick, Jeremy Cottam, Paul Dick, Billy Drummond substituting for Eric Pattenden, Christopher Reid and Howard Wollaston is substituting for Councillor McKinnon and is attending online. We also have with us Councillors Patrick Clark, Heather Codling, and Justin Pemberton with us? Yes. Yeah, sorry. Should be wearing my glasses. I've got two pairs of glasses now, which doesn't help. Council officers present to advise and support the meeting are Nigel Lynn, Chief Executive, who's attending remotely, Paul Coe, Executive Director for Adult Social Care, Anne-Marie Dodds, Executive Director for Children and Family Services, Neil Goddard, Service Director for Education and SEND, Susan Tanner, Service Director for Delivering Better Value, Rebecca Wilshire, Service Director for Children's Social Care. Sorry? Not Maria, I beg your pardon. Yeah, thank you very much, Gordon. Yeah. Alex O'Connor, Acting BCT Manager, Dawn Bond, Legal Services Manager. I'd also like to welcome Superintendent Andy Penrith from Thames Valley Police. Thank you for joining us this evening. Gordon Oliver is clerk for the meeting and Thomas Radbourne is the Zoom host. Before we start proceedings, I would like to explain for the benefit of members of the public who may be watching that tonight's meeting is being held over both Zoom and with councillors present in the chamber. The meeting is being live streamed on YouTube, so members of the public are able to view proceedings. If we hear the fire alarm this evening, we must leave the building immediately via the emergency exits. The assembly point is the Dolphin car park. If the lockdown alarm sounds, we will await instructions from officers. We will adjourn the meeting until such time as it is safe to proceed. Do members have any questions about the way in which this meeting will be conducted this evening? No. Okay, thank you. On to item 1. Do we have any apologies, please?
Yes, Chairman, we have received apologies from Councillor Eric Pattenden, Councillor Billy Drummond is attending as his substitute, and from Councillor Ross McKinnon and Councillor Howard Wollaston is attending remotely as his substitute.
Thank you. Item 2, minutes. Do members have any comments on the minutes of the meeting held on the 17th of July, please? No. Okay, I've got a couple of things here. Item 9, regarding the school's clawback. I had asked where it says in the regulations that schools have to keep independently raised money separately. And I've now been told it's because of VAT regulations. And it's also been brought to my attention. I know there's lots of speculation at the moment about the schools forum, how it operates and so on. And I think we could probably do a job of sharing information with the public about what the schools forum function is, because I think that's raised some confusion. And I'm conscious, having looked at the schools forum terms of reference, that the members are supposed to represent a block, albeit, you know, maintained sector academies and so on. And I just wondered if we could make that clear to people, because I know there was confusion at the schools forum. People thought schools were representing their own school, and they probably don't appreciate they're actually representing a block. So I think we need to make that clear. Item 11, about promoting the role of scrutiny. The press team put out a press release about the role of scrutiny recently, and they've also offered me up as an interviewee to the press. So I'm sure there'll be a stampede for that. And I'm also going to be making a video which we're going to put online about the role of scrutiny as well. So just trying to promote what it is we're doing and what our function is. We also talked about the need for a long-term log of recommendations to executive. So as members will know, we make recommendations to executive. Whether or not they accept them is obviously up to them. But what we probably don't do a very good job of is looking back at those recommendations once they've been to exec and saying which ones did executive say they were going to do and have they actually been done. So that's something that Gordon and I have talked about, and we need to get on top of that. I think that might be it from me on the minutes. You'll be glad to hear. Do I have a proposer for the minutes, please? Councillor Reid, seconder. Councillor Amatharaj, thank you. All those in favour? Yep, thank you. Any abstentions?
I wasn't there.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Tick. Great. Item 3, actions from previous meetings. Does anyone have anything that they would like to raise from this? Nope. I've got here items 116 and 143, I think could probably be amalgamated because they relate to similar issues. And I've got a note to myself that 161 is outstanding. Performance year-end report from Jenny Legg.
Yes, Chair. I think there are some actions outstanding for Jenny Legg. Some of the actions just cannot currently be progressed due to limitations with the in-phase software. Certainly for action 160, we were suggesting that she liaises with Councillor McKinnon regarding the performance and pictures infographic, which he raised. Action 162, we're suggesting that she liaises with Councillor Sumner regarding changes to the sunburst diagram. Is there anything else that we've missed on that?
Okay, that's fine, thank you. And then item 165, we had talked about having a joint session with the executive, which is something that we did last year, as members will recall. I have had a conversation with Councillor Brooks about this. The consensus is that at this time we won't have a joint session like we did last year, but obviously that option is open to us in the future if we want to do it. Obviously, it's up to the Scrutiny Commission to decide what their work programme is and what they want to focus on. But if at any point we would like a meeting with the executive to get a steer on their priorities, obviously what we look at is up to us, but there's no harm in having the conversation and finding out what their priorities are. Then that option is open to us in the future, but we won't be proceeding with that at current time. Okay. Right, moving on. Item 4, any declarations of interest from members? Councillor Reid.
I have declared this before, but item 11, which is the appointment of the task and finish group for Sports Hub. I was a member of the rugby club previously and a coach for the club, but it was many years ago and should not make any difference to my decisions or analysis.
Thank you. Any other declarations of interest? Nope. Okay, thank you. Any petitions?
No, Chairman, we haven't received any petitions.
Okay, thank you. So moving on, community safety update. The Scrutiny Commission is designated as the Council's Crime and Disorder Committee. As such, it is required to meet at least annually to review or scrutinise decisions made or other action taken in connection with the discharge by the responsible authorities of their crime and disorder functions. So I'd like to invite Nigel Lynn, our Chief Executive, who is joining us remotely, and Superintendent Andy Penrith, please, to give a presentation on behalf of the Community Safety Partnership. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies for not being with you this evening. So I've got a few introductory slides, and I'll then pass over to Superintendent Andy Penrose, who will go into the detail, particularly around the crime data, which I think you'll be quite interested in and so forth. So the first few slides are just a reminder really about why we are where we are, and what we're going to cover is the partnership, the achievements, the work streams, challenges, and then Andy will get into the crime overview. So but there's a lot of legislation behind this. So it is a legislative partnership that we have to have. We've got statutory partners, as you can see there, obviously ourselves and the police, but also fire, probation and health. And then we also get representatives from the wider community and voluntary sector, Health Watch, faith sector, etc., to make it a more rounded partnership. And we meet fairly regularly and we go through a lot of the crime data that Andy is going to talk about on a summary point of view on a regular basis. So the aim, of course, is that we want a safe place to live, work, learn and visit. And that's what we're aiming to do. We've got objectives about reducing, preventing crime, making sure we've got those statutory responsibilities, safeguarding the vulnerable, responding to things that may change. And, you know, if you give an example of the recent riots, for example, there was a lot of around the country, not in West Berkshire, but around the country, there was a lot of behind the scenes work between ourselves and the Thames Valley Police about how that was dealt with or being controlled, etc. And we also fulfill the role of the Prevent Partnership Board and the Youth Justice Management Board as well. So in terms of what's gone on within the last year, this channel, which is about how we assess the extent to which people are vulnerable and being drawn into terrorism. And you'll see there the channel panel, a bit of a mouthful, being held monthly. We've then got the prevent side of things as well, and the prevent is to prevent people from being drawn into terrorism. And again, we have a plan, we have annual risk assessments, and we make sure that that work is ongoing as well. There's also the modern slavery side of things, which I'm sure you can imagine still goes on, unfortunately, and we keep a close eye on that. And then the serious violence in terms of what's going on in terms of our reduction strategy, which we tried to obviously reduce any violent crimes. We need to do quarterly returns, etc. And we do get grant funding as well, which I'll come on to in a moment. And the Domestic Abuse and Safe Accommodation Act as well, where we have a plan that we have to make sure. So quite a few statutory things that we manage on a sort of day-to-day rolling basis. When we come together, we oversee those programs. We've also got the Safer Streets project, where we've got £242,000 of grant there. I think when it finally came to us with the overheads, it was about 200,000. So this was to reduce antisocial behaviour. We had some issues in the Nightingales in the Greenham area, which we've brought in CCTV. We've had clear up days, outreach work, schools education programme, etc., to try and improve things in that area. And I suspect that Andy can give you some updates on the progress in terms of that Safer Streets project as well. So we have work streams going on this year, which are picked out there in terms of the giving tree and strategic analysis that we have to do to refresh what we're doing and make sure that we're up to date in terms of our strategies and so on. And the challenge is, you know, whether there's any ongoing concern of civil unrest, and I mentioned the riots recently. Martin's Law is coming in, that's going through the process, so that's linked to the Manchester bombing, and obviously the impact of Thames Valley Police in terms of how they've restructured things in terms of their local command units, and how we continue to work well together to ensure we have good communication between one another, and that we obviously address the aim of the partnership. So now over to Andy, who will deal with the crime data and answer any questions. And if you want to answer as you go along, Andy, or at the end, it's up to you.
I'll stop slide by slide and see if there's anything. Thanks, Nigel. And you'll all be reassured to see that my challenges are the same as Nigel's at the end of the presentation, because as he says, we do speak fairly regularly around a lot of this stuff. So if I start with our domestic abuse data, and the reason I want to start here is that this has been an area of focus for us, certainly over the last 6 months, but definitely in the last 12. And you can see on this slide that our rates of domestic abuse crimes have fallen 22% in the last 12 months. And many of you may look at that and think, you know, that's a good thing, or it might be a really bad thing. It might indicate underreporting. It could be all of these sorts of things. So we've had a lot of conversations and looked into our data to reassure everyone. This has been a real priority. So going back, my first detective role in policing was in our child abuse investigation unit. Protecting vulnerable people is something I'm really passionate about, and it's something I've brought into the command here as a real area of focus. So to go through a bit more data around domestic abuse, West Berkshire Police Area has the highest arrest rate for domestic abuse offenders. So when we respond to a domestic abuse crime, we arrest around 83% of perpetrators for those crimes. Obviously, not every crime warrants an arrest. There are times that you can deal with it by way of voluntary attendance interview or other sort of processes, but we are intentionally very robust in our approach in West Berkshire, because I'm sure many of you will be aware, for a variety of reasons, whether it's low numbers or otherwise, we have a disproportionately high domestic homicide rate within West Berkshire. So, you know, I make no apologies for our robust approach to domestic abuse, because it's the right thing to do. We have one of the best review rates from our supervisors within force. So when a domestic crime is recorded by the police officers who respond, within 24 hours, their sergeant, their inspector need to review that crime, check compliance, check we've done everything that we should be doing. We have the highest compliance rate within West Berkshire as anywhere in Thames Valley Police. We have one of the best engagement rates. We have the fewest amount of crimes that we can't detect due to a lack of engagement from victims. For us, that's only 6.3%, which is compared to 9%, 10% or more in other parts of the force. So we have comparatively better engagement. We have some of the lowest outstanding offenders for crimes in our area consistently over a period of time. We have around half that of our next comparable area, which would be South Oxfordshire and Vale of the White Horse in terms of the number of domestic offenders outstanding. And then crucially, our use of domestic violence protection notices and our conversion to domestic violence protection orders has gone through the roof over the last 6 months or so. So we have seen a 333% increase in domestic violence protection notices, and importantly, a 450% increase in domestic violence protection orders. Now, these are low numbers, which is why we have such astronomical percentage increases. We've gone from none or one in a monthly period up to between 4 and 6 in a monthly period. The reason for the difference in those numbers is we're better at converting the domestic violence protection notices to domestic violence protection orders through successful applications to the court. And the reason I raise this is the knock-on then to our high reduction in the number of domestic violence crimes that we've had, where we have our repeat victims who are constantly calling us, we respond. We now are far better at putting in a protective notice and a protective order through the court that gives that victim time and space over a 30-day period that the offender can't go back to their property for risk of being arrested, breaching a court order. And where you have these victims who may report 5 or 6 offences in a monthly period where we aren't responding effectively, we are now able to put court orders in place quite effectively, massively reducing that demand. But more importantly, giving these people time and space for us to engage as a partnership, better diversion, better support, which is then translating through better outcomes and all these other things. So you can see the various data there. And I noticed on the slide, it says our arrest rate is 75%. It's at the time of checking this morning, 83%. So even since looking at this data, we continue to move in the right direction around our response to domestic abuse. And I'll just pause there for any comments or questions on domestic abuse before I move on to other crime types.
Any questions or comments from members? Councillor Cotton.
No, just to congratulate you on major reduction that you've made. Well done.
Chair, can I ask? I want to ask a question on CCTV cameras when I get a minute. Can I go back to what?
Yeah, we can go back to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions? Councillor Codling.
I know that Children's Services have not seen a decrease in the numbers of children affected by this yet. So how long, obviously over the last year, you've got a decrease by 22%, but how long has this robust attitude been? Because we're not seeing the effect of that yet.
I would say certainly in the last 3 to 6 months, probably more than over the last 12 months. And that might account for then the delay and the knock on. I think from my discussions with Anne-Marie around children's social care, I'm not sure the numbers will correlate exactly because of some of the approaches in policing around capturing the voice of the child. We're likely to see an increase in our number of referrals through to children's social care because of our data compliance regulations and our need to report. So I'm not sure looking at the data just on face value in terms of numbers of referrals will actually portray an accurate representation, because whilst this falls, we're likely to see an increase in referrals around protecting children because of our new obligation to capture the voice of the child and therefore increase our reporting into the MASH and other things. But to reassure you, we're linked in with the partnership and have had those conversations with the executive director already to try and plan for how we can best manage that increased demand, but more importantly, get into the data and work out where there are vulnerabilities around children and look to best protect children that we can across partnership.
Thank you. Question from Councillor Dick.
Not a question, just a quick comment. With a different hat on in sitting in court, I commend West Berkshire because they stand out in terms of making applications for protective orders. I won't use the various terminologies, but orders which help intervention in domestic violence situations, that they are way in front of the others. No question.
Thank you. Back to Superintendent.
Thank you very much. If we move on to serious violence, less of an impressive story, unfortunately, with serious violence when compared to domestic abuse. However, as Nigel said earlier, West Berkshire continues to be a very safe place to live and do business. We've seen that our crime levels have stayed roughly the same at a comparatively low rate, as you can see on that data there. Our outcomes have remained similar. We've had a 2% decrease, but we're talking about small numbers of positive outcomes and charges and small numbers of crime. We've got work ongoing in the partnership. We've completed the strategic needs analysis, and that will inform the joint strategy. And there is a serious violence board that sits alongside the CSP, which is jointly run through members of the council staff who are leading for serious violence, as well as my Deputy Commander, Chief Inspector David Whitaker, who leads on serious violence for the partnership as well. So we remain in a good place there. If I move on to knife crime, then again, a similar story. We've seen an increase in knife crime here of 17%, but as you can see, that's 6 offences. And when we come on to some of the conversations around stop and search and get into that data that's on the next slide, I think you'll probably see for why some of that is when we look at our high stop and search rates and things, and the sort of proactivity that the officers are taking on the street to try and maintain very low levels of serious violence, very low levels of knife crime. As well, but happy to take any questions specifically on knife crime.
Councillor Cotton.
Yes, I understand there was an amnesty on knives. Is that correct?
Yeah, so nationally there is an operation called Operation Sceptre that runs. That will be happening again. I think it's in October or November. I'd have to just double check our comms list. Separately to that, we've run a separate national amnesty around zombie knives and these various different types of knives that have been running quite successfully around the force. What I don't have is any specific statistics or data that I can share around how successful that was. I can tell you from various management meetings I've sat in that people are saying it was a successful campaign across the force. But unfortunately, I don't have that data to hand if that was going to be your next question.
It was, but yes,
Yeah,
thank you.
apologies.
If you could forward those, that'd be
It has been
appreciated.
successful, and I'll follow that up for you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from members on that item? No? Okay, we'll move on to the next topic. Thank you.
Thank you. So if we move on to stop and search, hopefully if the slides move on and catch up. So West Berkshire officers are carrying out incredibly high numbers of stop and searches compared to other parts of the force. So again, it goes to that robust nature of their policing activity, their proactivity of the cops that you've got out patrolling your streets in the area. And if you look compared to our size, we're punching well above our weight to the likes of sort of big metropolitan areas, Slough, Milton Keynes, Reading, for example. Our outcome rate, however, is lower than the others. So this is part of an iterative process and a long period of time that's been going on. I don't know if you remember historically, West Berkshire officers carried out relatively few stops and searches if we go back 2 or 3 years in time. It's been a long process initiated by previous command teams that we've carried on. The officers are now carrying out far more stops and searches, and our focus is now converting that to make sure that the quality of those stop searches is where it should be. What I'm confident in is that the volume of the stop searches is acting as a deterrent effect because we continue to have low levels of violence, low levels of knife crime. However, then when you consider issues around public trust and confidence, our proportionality data, those sorts of things, we need to have it as an area of focus for us to get into the quality of those stop searches and the quality of those interactions. So there's a piece of work being managed by the Deputy Commander, Chief Inspector Whitaker. He's looking at how we improve the quality of those stop searches, but also how we do our own scrutiny. So we've now got effective internal scrutiny processes in place with senior officers dip checking body-worn video that the officers are wearing for their stop searches at random to look at quality of the searches, quality of the interactions, and taking appropriate action as needed, either with learning or if there are, were there to be any conduct issues, those would be addressed as well. And we're also looking at implementing new community and partner scrutiny processes. So this will be beyond the force processes that are currently being worked on. We'll have our own local processes that are in the works for either the end of this year or early next year to invite partners and members of the local community, probably through our IAG network and beyond, to have better scrutiny around our use of stop and search and advise how we continue that work moving forward. Happy to take any questions on stop and search.
Yeah, thank you, Superintendent Penrith. I'm the ward member for Greenham with the Nightingales. Quite a few stop and searches up there. Did you find any knives on them?
So I haven't got that specific detail here. I've got a slide later on in the presentation that I'll come on to around the Nightingales and some of our specific work in that area, because we've had an area of focus around problem solving linked to the Safer Streets funding that Nigel mentioned earlier. So I can cover that there. I don't have a specific data I could tell you on this day a knife was found on this person, unfortunately, but I can certainly provide that for you. if
Has
that'd be
anybody
useful.
been stabbed?
Has
Has
anybody
anybody been stabbed in the Nightingales?
not recently off the top of my head that I can remember.
No, I can remember one incident. I can't recall.
I don't think it was in the Nightingales, no.
But I mean, you seem to be putting on an awful lot of effort into the Nightingales. And I think, I used to live in the Nightingales 30 years ago. And I never really saw many trouble. I don't get many reports of crime up there. I mean, there's a few louts about drug dealers. There's drug dealers everywhere. But I don't get many complaints of actual real violence up there.
Yeah.
Yeah, right, thank you.
I would suggest it's because of our problem-solving work that I'll come on to it and
Well,
cover in the later slide.
I've been a board member up there for 24 years. And I know the area really well.
Mm.
And there's never really been that much trouble up there.
Okay.
Not compared to Cox's in Liverpool, Moss Side in Manchester, or Blackleys and Oxford. They would love to swap the troubles they got here.
Mm.
There's very little trouble here.
No, I completely agree with you. I think we're very lucky actually to live in and work in the place that we do. However, that doesn't mean that we can be complacent around the problems that we do have. And whilst comparatively, our problems are nowhere near that of larger metropolitan areas, whether it's Liverpool, London, wherever else.
Yeah.
I would soon be in here having a very different conversation with you if we weren't doing anything else, I'm sure. So yeah, that's our area of focus because that's where the data tells us. It's very fortunate that, you live there and you say it's not that big a problem. I have other members of the community that come forward and tell us that it is a big problem.
Right.
We have seen pockets of violence. We've seen drug dealing. We wouldn't have been able to bid to the Home Office and get the funding that we have had we not been able to evidence it through the data.
Right, thank you.
So Councillor Dixhand and then Councillor Wollaston.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Officer, for the continuing quality of your presentation. And you've just learned that you have an ally in Greenham, should you need him. He's over there. The stop and search issue is nationally a fraught one. So it's not simple to say they're really high, our rates, because obviously if the community start to feel that it's heavy-handed or inappropriate, then that can cause further problems of a lack of cooperation with the police. I'm sure you've got that in your mind. I hope you do. And ethnic minorities are always the issue there. And there's raw numbers here. Do you know how well the stop and search stats match the percentages in our population? Because that's the key thing, isn't it?
It is. In terms of our disproportionality, we are still disproportionate to mixed race individuals, Black individuals and Asian individuals compared to our population. We have the least or the lowest levels of disproportionality in our force area. However, we still have disproportionality, and that's something that's on our agenda regularly. We have our independent advisory group that meets quarterly, and we go through in great detail the stop and search data, and in particular the disproportionality data. I can pull that up and share that with you later on if you need, but we are aware of it as a problem. Again, we're in a fortunate position that we're the best, but being the best of a bad situation when you compare it nationally to a lot of problems. And, the issues of police legitimacy are certainly not lost on me when you see whether it's issues with our various community groups. I'll talk later on around, the civil unrest and some of the issues that we had. None of this stuff is lost on me at all. And you're absolutely right. There is a key area there around trust and confidence.
I hear, Officer, and thank you for that answer.
Thank you. Councillor Wollaston.
Councillor Dick beat me to it. Same question.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Superintendent. I represent one of the rural wards in this area, which is actually an incredibly low crime rate. However, we do have issues with drug pushes in the area, or whether it's wholesaling, I don't know. And we often do, as a community, report people that are often just parked up in rural lay-bys, car parks, in the middle of the night for no reason at all. I was just wondering, what's the response rate and what's the focus on the police on some of this, I would say, suspicious behaviour?
So rural crime remains on our tactical tasking coordination priorities, which is our methodology of how we prioritise various crime types and response. It will continue to be a priority for our area because we have such a big rural community because of the geographic nature of our patch. Our Police and Crime Commissioner and our Chief Constable have made it very clear that rural crime is a priority for the force. We have the Rural Crime Task Force, which I know has done some specific work in our area as well. I would encourage you and anyone that you speak to report those sorts of things to the police, because if you report those sorts of things, we can go and catch people, generate the intelligence, prevent some of these things. We have got relatively low levels. We'll continue to have low levels through that reporting. So it remains on our priority list. And I would encourage anyone to report those sorts of things. You know, someone parked in a car in the town centre at 10 p.m, far less suspicious than, you know, the circumstances you're describing. I would expect a response to come from the police to come and respond to that, at least to generate the intelligence, if nothing else. So please do encourage reporting.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Move on to the next topic.
So the next few slides are around violence against women and girls. So if I start with the data, and then I'll come on to some specific work that we're doing around Project Vigilant. So as you can see, we have seen a 14% reduction in crimes, and our positive outcome rate remains relatively high compared to other areas, around 1.8% above the force average. So if we move on to the next slide around Project Vigilant in particular. So Project Vigilant, for those who don't know, is a policing operation that uses both covert and overt deployment of police officers. The officers will deploy with behavioural detection training in plain clothes, supported by uniformed officers. And the idea behind the deployment is you have the discreet officers in plain clothes are looking out for the specific behaviours of those who commit predatory sexual acts in the nighttime economy in particular, which can then coordinate the response of the uniformed officers. And the response goes hand in hand. The uniform officers might disrupt people, might cause somebody to turn away unnecessarily or in a strange way. The plainclothes officers can then follow and intervene. And we've had a number of successful Operation Vigilant deployments in the town centre, but we've also looked to expand some of that into our big events at Newbury Racecourse with some recent success stories there and some arrests having been made. So there have been a number of interventions which have prevented a number of offences. We've then been making referrals to our partners and following up to prevent further offending. And there are lots of deployments planned to follow in September and November as well. We going beyond that, if I just touch very briefly, there's a Thames Valley Police communications campaign launching soon called It Does Matter. And that is a campaign that looks specifically at non-contact sexual offences as well within the nighttime economy. So these are your exposure and voyeurism type offences, as well as your sexual harassment of people in the nighttime economy. So not only are we looking at this locally in terms of our town centre neighbourhood teams and our response teams, we also have force resources that we can call on successfully, as we have done through the Operation Vigilant deployments, both overt and covert. And we're linking in with our communications team to look at those wider campaigns to reach a wide audience around violence against women and girls. Beyond that, in the partnership, if we move on to the next slide, is bystander training. And there's a definition up there of what a bystander is and somebody witnessing that inappropriate behaviour. And we're working with a women's aid charity to look at how can we deliver this bystander training, where can it go to? We're starting with pub staff, door staff, and we're looking to expand that wider through the partnership networks like the Business Improvement District, the Kennet Centre, any sort of business community that we can get involved in this and expand gives us the incremental gains of you know, the more people we can train, the more interventions we'll have, the safer everyone is out in our nighttime economy and in our public space. So that's just a sort of overview of some of the stats and some of the response to violence against women and girls in particular.
Any comments or questions on that topic, particularly members? No. Okay, thank you.
So on to antisocial behaviour, the data is there. We can see largely consistent. We've had an 11% decrease in antisocial behaviour crimes, but an 11% increase in antisocial behaviour incidents. So it is largely the same in terms of what's happening. Our key areas of focus are mentioned there in terms of the City Playground, Andover Road in Newbury, and in particular the Pangbourne area. And we had a lot of antisocial behaviour issues over the summer with Pangbourne Meadows. Youths gathering, becoming antisocial, drinking, small fires, amassing in sort of large groups on Pangbourne Meadows. Again, we've had quite a robust policing response. We've made good use of our dispersal powers that you will have seen in the press and the media. And then there's a longer term plan, which I'll touch on in a later slide, around looking at public space protection orders. We're well linked in as well across the partnership, but also with our local MP. So we're exploring what different ways we can generate more reporting to help support some of those public space protection order applications, as well as designing what our response looks like.
Finished. No, was there another slide? Okay, thank you. Councillor Amatharaj.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Superintendent, for the update. My question is on the theft offences. Is a household burglaries included in the theft offences list?
No, I don't think it is on this list, because typically we would see that separate, either in terms of burglary in a dwelling, burglary in a connected building, or burglary in a business premises. So I don't think those are. What we have seen locally are slight increases in our burglary offences across the entirety of the borough. Some of that is due to shed breaks, some of that is due to business offences that we've seen. We've had a look. Our DCI is reviewing what our response looks like to those at the moment. What we haven't got are any particular series or trends or anything that we need to brief the public on to make people aware of any sort of specific crime prevention advice beyond the necessary.
Thank you, Superintendent. Yeah, Sharon. The reason I inquire about this one is, if you recollect, this time last year, there were a spurt of incidents, burglaries in my ward, but in other areas of Newbury. What I'm understanding is from the investigation updates, we got it was more of a coordinated attack, not from this area, but someone from up the north. Or so my question is, what assurances you can give to the public in terms of there's targeted thefts? Because I have a couple of residents in my ward where they went for a holiday and then they were targeted because they were on holiday. So it's more of a targeted occurrence last year. So every day in next door apps and everywhere in the comms, we can see like there is a theft. So what's the assurance we can give to the public in terms of the police response on that one? Thank you.
No problem. So the first point of assurance is, as I said earlier, that there are no current crime trends or series that we're seeing in terms of specific targeting of types of houses or when people are away. We still see sporadic crime offences, unfortunately, but we are looking at our processes internally. The chief and the PCC have made the promise that we will attend every residential burglary, which is continuing and gives us the best opportunity to capture forensic evidence, gives us the best opportunity to identify who these people are. We've implemented quite recently a weekly crime meeting within the station, which brings together our priority crime detectives who look at investigating the burglaries, with our integrated offender management team that manage offenders who are coming out of prison, because unfortunately we still have a lot of recidivist thieves that operate when they come out of prison. So that they work quite closely together. We're looking at how we generate more intelligence as well as our neighbourhood policing team. So typically we've had very low rates of burglary, and that continues. But I don't want to be complacent around that, especially as we come into longer nights are drawing in. We get into the winter period. We know typically that our offences do go up across the force, across the country. I want us to be in a really strong position for that. So we've implemented the new weekly meeting to make sure that we are on top of that data, but also looking at the different opportunities. So the second we see something that either is out of the ordinary or a particular trend or a particular series, we're in a good place that we can respond holistically across all of the elements of policing, not just response and not just a detective, but the response, the detective, the intelligence teams, the neighbourhood teams can come together in that weekly meeting as we sort of get into the winter period. Thank you.
Councillor Bowick.
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you, Superintendent Penrith. I don't see anything here about rural crime in general, and I'm pleased to hear that you talk about it as being one of your priorities. I represent a rural ward, and we have in our area chronic, severe antisocial behaviour affecting some important rural businesses and residents. And it's been going on for a very long time. There have been a variety of initiatives going back as long as I've been the ward member. And more recently, the partnership has been meeting to discuss these issues. One of my parishes has called for an antisocial behaviour review. Little has happened to change the behaviour that we see. And it's really, particularly for the residents, a small number of residents, it is extremely disturbing and just won't go away.
Yeah, I'm very sorry to hear that. What I'd suggest is we chat after the meeting. I'll give you my details and we can link up and find out why that is, and I'll look into that for you.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Thank you.
If we carry on with the slides, then just staying on ASB. So we've had the overview of the data. Here's some specific use of our powers that I've mentioned. So looking across the snapshot of the data we've got there, we've had a number of full closure orders put on properties. We've had extended orders put in place. We've had a number of PSPO dispersals, 16 there. You can see the number of Section 34 dispersal orders that I mentioned earlier in Pangbourne Meadows, as well as Section 60 stop and search authorities within the Nightingales area, which obviously are as a result of either serious violence taking place or police being in receipt of intelligence that serious violence is imminent. If we move on then to the final slide around antisocial behaviour and in particular problem solving. So this is looking at our problem-solving approach to the Nightingale. So we've had lots of reports of serious violence in the past. We've had community door-to-door surveys that have been undertaken, which have identified the various priorities that we need to focus on. And some of the results to mention on the back of the funding that Nigel talked about in his presentation is we've now got daily hotspot patrols happening from police officers and PCSOs. We've secured the house closures that I mentioned. There have been community clear-up days. We've had civil injunctions. We've got that funding. That funding is helping provide CCTV cameras. We've had an eye on the future around those CCTV cameras, and we've been savvy around the procurement of those, that they are mobile cameras. So in the future, should our priority areas change, rather than having a load of CCTV in one place that we can't move, we've paid a little bit more money to have CCTV that we can move, which allows us to be more agile as a partnership when those sort of trends do change. And you can see there that the community ASB survey that was completed with the same residents, the result of some of this work has shown a significant reduction in serious violence and antisocial behaviour within the estate, which goes back to your point, Councillor Drummond. It seems like we've improved things. Maybe your area was always the same way, but a lot of the residents have come forward and said that they are quite grateful, and there's a perceived reduction in serious violence and serious ASB within Nightingale's estate. And then there's a snapshot there of some of the headlines from Newbury Today as well, but happy to take any questions on that before I go to my final slide and summarise.
Any more questions on antisocial behaviour? No. Okay.
So the future challenges slide, very similar to, as Nigel mentioned. So the first one that I'll talk about is just around our change in structure for local policing being delivered within Thames Valley Police. So some of you may know, and has happened in other parts of the force, we currently are set up as local policing areas. So each local policing area aligns to council boundaries and has a superintendent as the local area commander. In May of next year, Berkshire will be merging into the local command unit structure, which we've seen in other parts of the force. So Berkshire West will be the council areas of West Berkshire, Reading and Wokingham. And the new structure will be a chief superintendent as the head of that area, with a detective superintendent and a uniform superintendent and various structures underneath. So there are a number of benefits that come from this. There are increased neighbourhood policing team officers. So the PCC and the chief have publicly committed to doubling the number of geographic neighbourhood officers that will be patrolling your areas and your wards. You will have better support from a dedicated detective chief inspector and detective superintendent overseeing more serious crime in the area. We will be implementing in our area, it's gone live in other areas, a harm reduction unit, which the remit of the harm reduction unit is looking at vulnerabilities, civil orders, actively managing recidivist offenders, looking at better use of those orders, linking in nicely with our domestic violence unit, which is coming back into local management. So the two will operate together rather than sort of in the siloed structure that we have now. The added bonus of that is that this work going on around protection orders and vulnerabilities and safeguarding often sits with our neighbourhood officers, because it's one of those things that in policing it seems like it's everyone's business, so we're not really sure where it goes, and that sort of stuff falls to the neighbourhood a lot of the time. This helps professionalise, if you like, safeguarding. And I don't use that term because our neighbourhood officers are not professional. I use that term because actually it should always have sat somewhere else and give it the dedicated support and resource that it needs. But then it means it frees up those neighbourhood officers that were doing that. That means they can be out engaging with the community, solving problems in their area, getting to grips with all these sort of issues. So we will see massive benefits from that. We will have increased schools officers, we'll have dedicated mental health officers, that sort of ability to better manage those orders, increasing detectives on our domestic abuse unit, myriad benefits that come from this. So those eagle-eyed will be wondering why I've put this in challenges, because I've been nothing but positive. The challenge comes for us in the partnership, because whereas now you have a local area commander that is aligned with your council boundary and I can come and be scrutinised and be held accountable, that might change going forward in terms of who you go into, and will you have one commander for 3 areas? Will their time be disrupted? So Nigel and I have had a lot of conversations around this. I'm well linked in with the partnership around how we manage that. The challenge for us is not about the delivery for the public. The delivery for the public, I think, will be exponentially better through this model, and this is the right thing to do. Challenge for us is how do we maintain those partnerships and make sure that we as senior police officers are dedicating enough time to those partnerships, not just to meet our statutory responsibilities, which we can do, but make sure that we maintain the relationships that we've had here that have left us in such a positive position in terms of the good work across the partnership and the good work in the area. So that's why it remains on as a challenge, but it's something that we're very conscious of and we're discussing regularly. And I will put the various key people in touch with Chief Superintendent Felicity Parker, who will be the new commander of the local command unit going forward from May next year.
Great, thank you. Councillor Wollaston, I can see your hand.
Yeah, can I firstly just congratulate Superintendent Pendrith? This sounds a great report and things are going well. I represent Lambourne. I've got a particular issue with one of my residents who's approached me and has had an issue with an officer from Bracknell and Woking. Is that covered by you, sir?
It's not, but I can try and help.
If I could possibly just have a contact of who I might talk to, because has not been a great result, to be honest.
Okay, well, my email address is on the slide there. I'm very happy.
I'll email you tomorrow morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ian.
That was really well done.
Thank you very much. The final 2 points on the future challenges are around civil unrest that Nigel has touched on. I think the key point to take away is that there were lots of plans in place. We were very fortunate that we saw no offences and no unrest within the Thames Valley, but that didn't mean that we were complacent. We had lots of plans in place, lots of meetings. I suppose a key point for me is around the misinformation. And I suppose it's an ask to everyone involved in this partnership and anyone who's watching live or watching this back as well. There were so many issues across the country and within other parts of the Thames Valley led by misinformation. I implored people who dialed into the briefings, challenge the source of the information that you are reading. Do not pass on the information unless you are confident it is accurate, and all those sorts of things, because we saw more issues from misinformation than we did from anything else within the Thames Valley area. But we were in a good position ready to respond. And the final point is just around growing demand versus resource. It's something that Nigel and I have discussed. We are both public sector organisations with limited money, and we have to do more with less. But all of the things that I've talked about where we're in a good position around a lot of things would not be able to be achieved without proper investment in the various things. And one of the concerns that I do have is around ongoing requests for public space protection orders, like we've been talking about for Pangbourne Meadows, to try and solve that. There is only so much resource within our neighbourhood teams currently, and within the CSP team as well. So I do have concerns around that, and it's a challenge that Nigel and I will need to be alive to in how we best use that resource, or whether we seek further investment to try and mitigate these things and try and meet this demand of PSPO requests, changing ASB challenges, our duty under Martin's law that's coming in the future, and all these different things will need resource and will need funding. And I'm not sure we're set up entirely to meet that across the partnership.
I saw your hand, Councillor Dick. Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Superintendent, for your presentation. There are other views about the new structures coming in the police, very negative ones, you'll know that. If only because every time an organisation changes, you waste resources making those changes, and you forget about the people out in the cold, as it were, inevitably. But your attitude tonight reassures me personally, in any case, that we will be making the most of the opportunities that the new changes bring. But we'll be watching you, sir. We'll be watching you from the sidelines. Let's go back to targets. Targets are always very interesting. What should the target be for any one of these crimes you've talked about tonight? It should be 0. It shouldn't be reduced by 10%, 20%. It should be 0, full stop. Maybe it's not achievable, but it should be 0. But I think there's an issue, it's not been mentioned at all, which is big in West Berkshire, areas like West Berkshire, and it's crime versus the fear of crime. Discuss. You've told us what you're doing about crime, but for a lot of people in our area, it's the fear of crime. They think. They see in the papers, they see in the news, they think. And that's as real for them as it is, as a crime is for someone else. What are you doing for these people?
So there are a number of things that we're looking to do with our neighbourhood teams to try and increase visibility and better communication. And unfortunately, the force took a decision to reduce some of the staffing around Thames Valley alerts and some of those things that have gone out. In West Berkshire, we've put one of our staff onto that to try and maintain who can do that to better reach out. We've had conversations with our neighbourhood inspectors around, are we communicating in a way that actually hits all of our communities or not? Because it's very easy for us to think we post on social media about something. Well, not everyone uses Facebook, not everyone uses Instagram, not everyone uses these different things. And I've had that conversation quite recently around what are we doing around radio? What are we doing about print media? What are we doing around our Thames Valley alerts to reach people on email? But then beyond that, we're looking at what we can do through our neighbourhood watch associations. How do we better cascade messages out? What are we doing with our face-to-face engagement? All of those sorts of things. So it's on the radar. You know, I'm happy to go on the radio and start putting some stuff out. My team tell me I have a face for radio rather than television, so I'll let somebody else go on the TV and do that. But it's on the agenda, and we talk about it in our neighbourhood policing performance meetings.
Thank you, because it's real. The only thing you didn't mention there was wearing out leather. I commend it to you.
Thank you, Councillor Dick. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Superintendent, and again, superb presentation of data. Obviously, it's about safer streets, so not things like fraud and scams, which obviously is concerning. But I'm kind of interested in, where does retail crime, shoplifting, where does that sit? Is that part of the safer streets, part of?
So retail crime for us, our response is Operation Purchase as a force. We have some dedicated resource within West Berkshire that looks at Operation Purchase locally, as well as through our sort of central triage teams. So when you report a crime online, or if you call the police via 101, it goes to a triage process through our assessment and investigation unit, who have a dedicated retail crime team sat within that, who will make contact with the various retailers, try and do that secondary investigation that they can remotely, pass it to the local area, as well as our local team that are going out and trying to build relationships. For me, I think, retail crime has been a bit of an own goal for policing over the last couple of years. We've taken our eye off the ball around shoplifting. We've prioritised, rightly in a sense, looking at vulnerabilities and things like that, and sort of real areas of risk. And what we've missed is that retail crime is so cross-cutting across all of our communities. You know, everyone works in a shop, or goes to the town centre, or goes to the retail park, or, stops their car on the motorway services, or whatever it might be. And not responding to those things, I think, has been very damaging to trust and confidence in the community over a period of time. We've implemented a lot of things now as a force, as well as locally, to try and bring that back. We've seen a big increase in our charge rate around retail crime over the last couple of months. I think we've increased by again, sort of, we're talking about 10 offences to 19 offences. So I won't try and claim the glory of 111% increase or whatever it is, but we're starting to see those green shoots of not only better response in terms of our charge rate, better patrolling, better disruption of things. I went to a neighbourhood watch meeting that was chaired by our neighbourhood watch community coordinator, I think about 2 months ago, and the feeling from local retailers in the town centre, as well as people from the neighbourhood watches, they've noticed that there are pairs of officers now patrolling the town centre a lot more visibly that hadn't been done in previous months. And we're starting to expand that as well out to the retail parks, making sure that's being pushed to Thatcham, making sure it's going to the motorway services as well. And people are responding, back to your point, Councillor, around a better feeling certainly within Newbury Town Centre, but we're very conscious that our policing area is not just Newbury Town Centre. It's quite easy to get sucked into that, especially around retail crime. So we're building on some of that success and trying to push it out a bit wider. So it's very much on the agenda, and I can certainly find more data if you'd like after the meeting, or talk about it separately.
Councillor Drummond.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I want to go back to Superintendent Penrith for the CCTV cameras. I mean, I was executive member for community safety in 2003-04 when I had a serious stroke and I had to resign. And I was really pleased that we managed to get 2 fixed CCTV cameras in Nightingales. So outside the community centre, there's that great big high pole and across going north. And there's another camera, but they were removed sort of 4 or 5 years later. I was going to ask you the question, can we get them replaced? But I heard you say in your presentation that there's 2 mobile cameras.
I'll just defer to Alex on the numbers.
Regarding the Safer Streets 5 project, Billy, well, there's going to see CCTV installed in Greenham. There's about 9 cameras going up, I want to say. And I think...
Did you say that? I can't hear you. No.
There's about 9 cameras going up.
Where are they going up?
Safer Streets. Sorry.
And
yes, as part of the Safer Streets Fund grant.
Is that permanent?
They will be the mobile cameras that Superintendent was talking about. So they will be up there for the duration of the project, which is till March, and they will stay there as the demand.
Are they up at the moment?
They are about to be installed. The poles have all been done. We're just waiting for Thames Valley to actually put the cameras in. So it's imminent. As I speak, it's imminent.
Yeah, we want to be waiting for them. How high are they going to go up? Can you tell me how the high are going to go up? The kids see them, are going to be able to knock them down? Because I know they'll have a go at them.
It's all been done under spec.
All right.
So
could there any chance of why you could let me know where they're going to go up?
Yeah, we can set
I'll let you know.
later.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cotton.
Thank you. Just a response to the fear of crime, and we had a really good response from Thames Valley Police in response to Thatcham Town Council, which was basically there used to be a lot of cars just going along the A4. And at our request, and we just said, well, instead of doing the A4, just down round the Broadway, along the High Street, and we get this done regularly now. It's a simple thing, but it really reassures people. And I know that the PCSO car is now marked up as well. And sometimes that to address the fear of crime, which is just as real for the particular individual, by just having a presence, even if it's just a patrol car going around. So on that basis, also, I would like to thank them in responding to that. And maybe they can do that. And, the A4 is a conduit, I appreciate for a lot, but maybe in other villages, I don't know, Thiel or something like this, something might be appropriate. And I leave that to obviously the member. But again, thank you very much for responding to the fear of crime, because that is significant. I mean, it sounds sad, but it really is being addressed properly. Thank you.
Great. I'm conscious we haven't had any questions for our Chief Executive, Nigel Lynn, and also Alex has very kindly joined us this evening, and it is a partnership between ourselves and the police. So do we have any questions for our officers, members? Oh, okay. I'll just ask a question myself. Are we content that the partnership between our different organisations is working well? Is there anything more we could do in that regard?
If I can respond, Chair, I think a lot of this is about building relationships, as Andy said, and we meet independently of the partnership meetings as well. And Alex and her team also meet independently on regular basis to deal with issues. And I think it's how you build that relationship, how you build that trust up. And we have a lot of mobile phone conversations on the spot to keep things, so we understand what's going on, particularly where we're talking about the fear of the riots and so on. I mean, Andy and I are on the phone probably every day during that period. So it is about building that relationship, being strong. We do always have the issue about the resources, as we mentioned, going forward, and that will become more and more difficult, I think, for both of us. But as long as we've got that good relationship and we're both, in terms of the partnership and our wider partnership, but we want to make improvements and want to deliver, an even safer place to live, then I think that's the way forward. And, the relationship, I would suggest, is very good at the moment. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Lynn.
And I agree, and I know we're marking our own homework saying this, but I've worked in other areas where the relationship is not so strong across all elements of the partnership, not just within the CSP. I think you got a very fortunate area in West Berkshire to have such strong relationships within the CSP, but also wider in all elements of the partnership. I've been very impressed since I've been here for the last 6 months or so, actually, at how engaging everyone has been, because I haven't always found that in other areas.
Thank you very much indeed for your presentation. Thank you for joining us, Superintendent. Much appreciated. Thank you to our officers as well. Very interesting presentation, lots of questions, so very grateful for that. You mentioned about a slight restructure of areas. Perhaps if you could share with Gordon any other contact details that you think we ought to have, then Gordon will be able to share that with the members of the commission.
Of course,
very helpful.
Just for clarity, the restructure won't happen until May of next year.
Okay.
So I'm just putting it on the radar as early as possible, because it's something, a challenge that we're aware of for the future. So probably nearer the time, I'll make sure that those details are shared.
Great, that'd be really helpful. And if there's any data on any other specific issues that members want, if you let Gordon know, then you can have a conversation about that. Fabulous. Thank you very much indeed, everybody. Much appreciated. Right, moving on to item 7, Adult Social Care Complaints Annual Report. Due to have an update from Patrick Clark and Paul Coe. Is Patrick with us? Is he online? No. Okay, so hand over to Mr. Coe then. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm very happy to bring forward this report, which will give you some insight into the volume and nature and management of the complaints into the Adult Social Care Department. A bit like the previous presentation, the numbers in and of themselves need to be treated with a degree of kind of contextual reading. You'll see that we've had a slight increase in the number of complaints, albeit that they are still lower than the historic high in 1819. Worth noting as well that the number of referrals into the local government social care ombudsman is very low. In fact, only one in the 23-24 period, which was then referred back to us because it hadn't been through the proper channels. And that the speed of compliance in terms of management of complaints remains good. So happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you, Mr. Coe. Just to provide some context, this is coming to scrutiny. It used to go via the Customer First Programme Board, but that no longer exists. So that's why the item has come to us this evening. And we will need to have a vote on whether or not we approve this report. Questions? Councillor Amatharaj.
Thank you, Chairman. I was going to say, yeah, this is the first time we've seen this report, so I'm not sure the kind of questions we are allowed to ask in this one, because it relates to certain compliance and there is privacy issues and all this one. So please bear with me if I ask this. Thanks, Paul, for this report. I just want to take you to the one complaint. I think all of the councillors received this. It's a whistleblowing one. I think Mrs. Clark's responded that in October last year that it will be taken care of. It was related to a safeguarding issue of people working in the care homes, that they are not eligible to work or they are not fully qualified. So my question is on that, because I couldn't see anything in the nature of complaint, particularly to this. Could I point to that it was one complaint related to quality of care? Maybe it's a guessing game. So can I ask specifically how this complaint was addressed? Because this seems to be a recent trend where there is a lot of care providers hiring people from outside of UK who may not be fully trained or qualified to work. So just wanted to know about this complaint out of that interest, but please ignore this or overrule this one if this is something to do with the complaint. It's a whistleblowing and it's should not be in this committee. Thank you.
Mr. Coe, would you like to comment on that? Yeah.
And I believe I know the whistleblowing that you're talking about. One of the complications with this is that some complaints will be addressed by us, and in this particular case, some elements were more appropriate to be managed by another neighbouring authority. So so there's an issue about our staff and the appropriateness of the relationships between our staff and colleagues within the same organisation. That has been fully investigated through our whistleblowing policy by our internal audit manager. So it wouldn't feature in here because it was managed through a different process. And in terms of the wider issues relating to the workforce in that provider, because the provider's headquarters is not in West Berkshire, it wouldn't have featured here either. So aspects were picked up by Reading, aspects were picked up by audit, and none of it ended up in this report.
Okay, just to supplement you on this one, thanks, Paul. I think that I understand if this is not in this report, it could be one of the two places. But I'm coming to the point where, because of this report or whistleblowing incident, how is our care providing capabilities? Have they been compromised, or it is up from your investigation, from your department? It's good? We don't need to worry. That's what I wanted to hear from you.
Sure. Yeah, and it's worth saying again, and I don't want to sound like I'm creating a fog of uncertainty in this. We've got another element within the council who looks specifically at care quality more broadly. So who deploy often to make sure that providers of care are functioning appropriately in terms of the quality. On this particular case, so the internal audit manager found no basis to be concerned about the nature of the relationship. So I was pleased to note, and she's if you don't know her, she's entirely independent, entirely rigorous in the way that she approaches her work. So we have there are a number of controls around how do we make sure that care quality is good. So there is the Care Quality Commission. They have a duty, of course. We have our care quality team. They have their role. We have our reviewing officers who will, if they go and visit somebody who's in a setting, for example, or even just through regular contact with service users, they will also pick up quality issues. And we also have, it's not a huge network, but we do have a network. So the neighbouring authority, in this case, we have routine arrangements where our respective care quality teams talk to each other about providers that might have there might be concerns or an embargo or something like that. So I don't want to be in a position where I'm saying all care is fine all of the time. Of course, it's not. There are workforce challenges. There are pay and remuneration issues, etc. You know, we know that the sector isn't what we would want it to be all of the time. But we do have a whole host of controls that make sure that where we are, either where it's care delivered in the district or whether it's care that we commission outside of the district, that it meets certain standards.
Thank you, Mr. Go, for the assurance. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Cottam.
Thank you. Turning to page 54 of the report, there's a bar chart giving numbers of complaints received by the team. And then it goes by area, west, central, east, etc. Obviously, if you just look at the graph, it looks like there's an issue in west. Are these areas the same? How are they divided? Are they all covering a similar size of population? So just trying to understand the figures. Is the west disproportionate to the others, or is it just because that area is larger? So just so we can understand the figures.
Thank you. It's a larger team supporting a larger population. It's broadly proportionate. I think it's a touch on. So the West team covers Newbury and all points west. So it does look after the population centre. They're organised by the number of patients registered with specific surgeries. So that's how they're configured. So you might say, well, why on earth aren't they more equal? It's because they're aligned to surgeries and because they cover particular patches, where some of which are more populous than others. But yeah, it's not a problem per se in the West team. It is it's a bigger team with more people to support.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Dick.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to go back to a question -1 from Anthony, and I don't think, Paul, you answered it properly. In fact, used the word fog, And that's how you left me. So I think the simple question was, do we need to be anxious or do we not?
The case that we're specifically referring to, I am absolutely reassured that it was properly, that the elements relating to our staff were properly investigated independently by our audit manager, you know, the council's audit manager, who was very rigorous, robust, and found nothing to be concerned about. And we are working with colleagues in a neighbouring authority about the provider more generally. So on that basis, I am assured.
Thank you. So am I. The fog has lifted. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Reid?
Thank you, Mr. Coe. You mentioned quality in some of the answers to Anthony and Councillor Burke, and I think Councillor Dick both brought this up yesterday. Quality is a key part, and I believe the ISO standard or definition of quality is fitness for purpose. Looking at the emerging areas of concern, we've got complaints around staff, and you've raised that in your report on page 50. In the pack, it's 58. I think in your report it's page 10. Often, if there's concerns about staff, it can be training. How confident are we that we've got sufficient training both internally and with our providers?
Thank you for the question. It's one of, well, I suppose like much of this, I would never want to give the sense of complacency. I think having the right people, properly trained, properly motivated, is the core to everything that we do, isn't it? So I don't think I'll ever be in a position where I say everything's fine, it's as good as it possibly can be. I think this report is a key mechanism in terms of saying, right, okay, where are we seeing gaps or deficits, and what is it we're going to do about it? We do have a dedicated trainer who looks after children and adult social services, who sees this report and will adapt the training offer to staff as a result of it. I also think we also have a specific team that works really closely with vulnerable adults in terms of the management of their finances, working with families and so on, who are very alert to how finances are managed. One of the things that West Berkshire Council is good at is charging service users what they can afford to pay in line with the national guidance. And naturally, some families will feel that they'd rather not pay for social care. It's a chargeable service. So there are a couple of bits bound up in this. One is us challenging families where they act inappropriately relating to finance of their vulnerable relative, and also us as a council charging families, individuals and or families, an appropriate amount. As the report says, the cost of living context makes it more likely that people are at risk of financially being abused, and also more likely that people will balk at making payments to the council for services received. And that's essentially what we're seeing here. I don't think that's an issue of training. I think in a way that's more about the national context. But returning to your point, we'll use this to inform the training that we deliver to staff. We do routinely. It's a cycle of improvement, essentially.
Brilliant. Thank you for that.
Councillor Drummond.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Coe, I'd like to ask you, are these complaints written or verbal?
We will take complaints as they come in. What we often do, well, what we routinely do, is to say to people, in order for us to properly investigate what it is that you're concerned about, we would like to go through a process of email, written, whatever, where we define, capture what is it you're concerned about. That might be something that we do with the person, or we might ask them to say, why don't you put this into an email so that we can capture it properly.
But could you tell me, is there a 50-50 split where written or spoken word, telephone?
I couldn't confidently, but I could come back to you once I've spoken with the complaints manager.
Because I mean, I would say that, you know, a written word, if it isn't recorded, then it hasn't happened.
My perspective is, I don't want to sound trite when I say this, but any complaint is an opportunity to learn. So I want my teams to be listening when somebody says this wasn't very good or I'm not very happy with this. Now, if you can resolve it very quickly, then it doesn't turn into a formal complaint. But if it can't be dealt with there and then, I do want my teams to be saying, okay, let's capture this, either by the staff writing it down or by the individual submitting it in an email or a letter or however they prefer.
Okay. Then could you get back to us with the number of written and verbal?
Yeah, it's probably, if it's okay, Councillor Drummond, I suspect what it will be is the complaints manager's best estimate. But yes, I will do that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Reid?
Just a point, it was very reassuring on page 13 to see that the compliments continue to outweigh the complaints. So I think that should be, you know, the Commission should be able to note that, particularly that they've done a very good job, and also on the previous section that compared to other councils of similar size, we're doing extremely well on the figures, but every complaint should be one above, as Councillor Dick says, above the target of 0.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. I would second that. Just a couple of questions from me, Mr. Coe. Whereabouts is this going to be published? So in the interest of transparency, obviously we want it to be somewhere where people can find it.
Yeah, so routinely on what I should have said at the start is that we'll make it slightly prettier. Once we've confirmed that the text is acceptable to this commission, then we'll top and tail it with some photos. Yeah, on the council's website. Yeah.
So you can reassure us it will be easily found.
I can contextual. So the way that the council uses its front-facing website is that it prioritises those areas which have the highest traffic, so recycling, roads, etc. If you search adult social care complaints, I'd be absolutely confident you can find it. If you just come onto the council's website, will it jump out at you? Probably not, for the reason I've just said.
It's fair enough, thank you. And just in the interests of assisting the public, I think it would be good if we could add a couple of web links. I think it referred on page 3 of the document to places on the web where people could find information. So if we could add the links, that would be useful, especially if it's going to be online, we could hyperlink. And just explanation of acronyms, I think would be useful as well, just so that people know what they mean. And then just my final comment, I'm conscious that we've got the compliments in, which is great, but we haven't really got any qualitative information about the complaints. And I'm conscious that they're anonymous and private, but I just wonder whether we could put a bit of a flavour in there about the kinds of things that people are saying, if that would be acceptable. Are you happy with that? Yeah, fabulous. Thank you, Mr. Coe. Great. Any other questions? No. Okay. So as I mentioned, we need to approve this report for publication this evening. So could I ask for a proposer, please? Councillor Dick, thank you. A seconder, Councillor Cottam. All those in favour? Great. Any against? Any abstentions? No, great. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Coe, for that. Great. So moving on to item 8, we now have the complaints report about children's social care, and we've got Heather Codling, Susan Tanner and Neil Goddard with us. And again, this is something that's coming to us for the first time. It went to the customer board before, so over to you. Thank you.
I'll go first. It's actually going to be Rebecca who's doing this one.
I beg your pardon.
That's
okay.
right. I'm
Sorry, Anthony. Yeah. Thank you, Anthony.
I'm going to be very brief and let Rebecca do the detail. But I can see, as you can from the report, that there are a reasonable number of complaints here, but quite a lot of them are only presented once. So, and there's a steep decrease in the numbers of repeated complaints. So I have good confidence that the department is actually learning from the complaints that come in and dealing with them. And I can see that, yeah, there's a number of compliments given, and I can see a really good action plan at the end of this report. So commend this report to you and hand you over to Rebecca.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you, Councillor Codlin. Similar to what Paul's already presented, so we're here for the same reason. We would like it approved for publication. It's a statutory requirement that we produce a complaints annual report. This is 23-24, and a lot of learning has come out of this and continues to come out of our complaints. We have since this report, we have a new manager in post. We're looking at how we respond and the improvements that we can make further around those areas and how we embed learning even more. There's a number of complaints that we're getting themes from. So again, we can target those and get training back in the system and then triangulate that as we move forward and audit further. As Councillor Codlin said, we have seen, whilst we've seen an increase in some complaints, we have seen a decrease in some of the repeated themes, which is positive. So it sort of tells us that what we get in and then what we're learning from it, we're trying to make some changes. We're doing a lot of work around creating a culture of learning, and we're really passionate about getting this right. We know we will always get complaints, and we just need to make sure that we're learning from them. And yeah, happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you very much indeed. Any questions from colleagues? Councillor Dick.
Thank you for this report. Whoever wrote it, it was written collectively, I think. To be frank, it shocked me a little bit. The number of complaints. We all know that people can be unreasonable. I'm unreasonable and I can complain. Yes, thank you, Councillor Drummond. It is true. But there's a large number of complaints. That concerns me a great deal. So I think, and I read the report, what would you say is the area of biggest need for improvement, which would consequently have the biggest impact on the happiness of our customers?
Thank you. I don't actually see the complainants as being difficult at all. I think we work in a very complex area. So actually the understanding of that when we're making decisions about children's lives or child protection and safeguarding, we're always going to have those differences of views. So I think some of our complaints are leading to families sometimes being unclear about our processes. So we need to make sure we're clearer in that. So entering care or child protection plans. So families are not always feeling that they have the information before them to properly inform them. So that's one of the areas we need to improve. And we see a lot of working with dads. So some of our complaints might come from fathers. So how do we make sure we're engaging dads in our process? So I think it's some of that around how we work with families and making sure families understand our statutory duties, processes, and the safeguarding arena.
Sorry. I don't like that answer at all, actually. You didn't answer my question. So if you were to make one thing a priority tomorrow, which would lead to a significant decrease in complaints, for whatever reason the complaints are, it's not good enough to say, well, people don't understand our processes. I know the areas you work in. I know that people aren't going to be happy some of the time. I know that. But a simple question, what is the one area that you could put a lot of energy in and make a big reduction in this? What is it?
Training.
For who?
For social workers.
Okay. Well, why didn't you say that? Thank you. Is that listed as a priority in the report?
Not in this report because it was written before I arrived.
Okay, well,
it is a priority.
Add it in. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Anne-Marie.
I think what would be, if you look at the complainants are parents. And I think the biggest thing that we would do that stopped complaints was taking children into care. Now, that is perverse because we must intervene where children need to be safeguarded, but it's parents of those children predominantly that we are removing that are making complaints. So if we are to see complaints in children's services come down, the likelihood is we'd be failing in our duty to safeguard children. So it's perverse as an incentive to reduce complaints.
Sorry, Chairman, I don't like the answer at all. Do you honestly think that I or anybody else in this room wants you to do what is not in the interest of children? Of course not. So your colleague is saying it's training, which therefore would mean that more parents would be better understanding of why you're doing what you're doing and how you've ended up there, because children aren't taken into care overnight except in exceptional circumstances. I know that, but I am concerned that we need to do better here. There's no question about that, nor do we need to put children at risk for the sake of doubt. I'll keep quiet now because I'll get cross.
Any further comments from officers? No. Okay, thank you. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. I see the words restorative being used quite a lot recently, and this, children's care is certainly not an area I fully understand or even partially understand. It's something that I've only really dipped into, other than being a parent myself and now becoming a counsellor. Can you explain to me, add a little bit more colour about what restorative care is, and for example, in table 3, reasons given for raising a complaint, alternative resolution and restorative, why we've got a couple of figures in there?
Of course, the restorative in this arena is more about doing with families rather than doing to families. So it will be opening up restorative conversations and looking at different ways to find solutions of moving forward with whatever their issue is that they have raised. So we would be having very open, reflective conversations with families and those involved in the concerns that's been raised.
Councillor Cotton.
Yes, it says in the board, page 7 for children's complaints. I appreciate you haven't written this report, but I can't actually see when I go to page 7 information about children's complaints, because I mean, there's the adult, and this is all about the children. And children should be listened to more than the adults. I've had some casework with this, and they're our focus. So is there in the future, or can we have, would the report have more information on feedback from the main object of what we're looking at here, which is children? And are they personally making complaints to us? Because that to me is the most serious. Parents are, they're used to it, and they're going to come forward because they don't like what's happening. But the child, needs to be listened to the most. I don't quite relate to what I saw in the index to page 7 to, it refers generally to children and family services on page 7, which is page 75 of our report. So just something an oversight or something that could be maybe included in new future reports. Or I'm maybe just missing it. It's a long report and I might. Table 5 they are. Well done. Where are we? There's so much here.
Did officers want to say anything in response to Councillor Cotton?
I mean, it's a really good challenge because we are children's services, but we don't get many complaints from children. But I suppose for parents, they would be saying they're advocating on their children's behalf. So, but we definitely can make that clearer in future around what the detail comes from our children's complaints. Absolutely. And I would like in our future report to include more around feedback from children. So we're looking at how we improve our feedback from families and children, which again would give us a little bit more detail in this report next year.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Bowick, but it doesn't really give you any substance. So yes, I'm looking forward to maybe more rounded report on the children. Thank you. But otherwise, I'm very happy with the report as shown.
Councillor Reid, did I see your hand again, or are you? No, okay. Councillor Bowick.
Thank you, Chairman. I recommend any member, if they're able to spend a bit more time with the corporate parenting panel and looking at what goes on in that forum. You'll find that certainly under our administration, and pleased to say that this administration has continued the focus on hearing the voices of children. So you'll hear a lot from our children if you listen into the corporate parenting panel.
Thank you. I just would like to see a bit more in the report as such, but thank you again.
I'm conscious that in the previous administration, we had a presentation about the corporate parenting panel. I'm not sure that we've had an update recently or like a training session or something. I wonder whether that might be something that's worth doing for all members so that they understand that we are all corporate parents and what their responsibilities are in that regard. Yeah. Councillor Drummond.
Chair, I seem to remember at one time on the corporate parent panel, and there used to be 8 councillors on that. And the opposition at the time, they've done away with that.
Okay, do we know how many members there are on the corporate panel at the moment? Councillor Codling.
Yes, there are currently 6.
Okay.
We should have had a meeting last week because the only one who turned up was me, which was a bit disappointing.
Right.
And we've had to postpone it. So we're waiting on a date for the next one.
Okay.
Which will be sometime during this next month. I'm still working on a date. I haven't got one yet.
Right, sorry, you put that in the public domain. The problem is that the dates keep moving and changing, and they need to publish their dates and stick to them. I'll be there.
Yeah, the dates have only changed this time because not enough members turned up.
Okay, so yeah, let's recommend as a commission that we have some kind of training or informal session where we can all get together, find out about our responsibilities, because it's entirely possible that some members don't understand their responsibilities as corporate parents. And maybe we could, I'm conscious that some meetings go awry, but maybe if we could forward plan and publicise the dates, that would be good. Thank you, members.
Can I just come back on that? We are actually trying to get this moved over to democratic services so it gets put into the proper cycle rather than just, it almost feels like it's a back office.
Good luck with that.
We're trying.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, questions, suggestions? No. Okay, thank you, members, and thank you very much to officers for coming along to present that report this evening. We also need to recommend this for approval. Do I have a proposer, please? Councillor Cottam, seconder, Councillor Drummond, all those in favour? Thank you. Any against? Any abstentions? No. Fabulous. Right, so that's gone through. Thank you very much indeed, everyone. Right, moving on, item 9, the Special Educational Needs and Disabilities High Needs Block. So this is an item that's going to be presented by Councillor Codling, Susan Tanner and Neil Goddard. This report is to note, so we won't be having a vote on this unless there are any formal recommendations that you want to make back to executive about it. Over to officers. Sorry, Councillor Codling, of course.
Obviously, we've all heard quite enough about the high needs block in the past few months, and the debt that sits with us that costs us on a daily basis in interest charges. And I just want to recommend this report around the DBV programme that we're part of, and our SEND strategy, which have all gone through. This is really just to give you an update on where we are with the DBV programme. The world of SEND is complex and the demands seem to be increasing daily. And today we attended the opening of Kennet Valley resource base, which is for SEMH children, social and emotional health problems for children. So, you know, we are doing what we can here. From the council, we're working with schools. We are trying to do as much as we can, but I'll leave the officers to go into more detail.
Great. And thank you for explaining the acronym. If we can explain acronyms for the benefit of the public, that would be great. Thank you very much.
Good evening, members. So I'm going to do a brief introduction to this report. There's a lot of data that comes with this report that you've seen attached, and we're happy to take questions on any element of that. As Councillor Codling has said, the pressures on the high needs block are well understood and are a national issue. the cost of meeting the needs of children with SEND nationally and locally is exceeding the level of resource that's available to deliver that support, and we are managing that as part of a strategic approach to the SEND system as a whole within West Berkshire. Heine's block that we talk about is part of the dedicated schools grant, so it's grant money, ring-fence grant money that comes from the government. As the report says, that comes in 4 blocks, of which Heine's block is one. That is specifically to support SEND, and the vast majority of it goes to schools in one way or another. So it either goes to our schools to support their support for children with SEND, or we are procuring or commissioning support from independent or maintained special schools or other routes. So this funding is all going to actually deliver that support. It's not about the process that supports it. The EHCP team, Education, Health and Care Plan, team, for example, which is funded in a different way. So this is very much money that is focused and going specifically to individual pupils. And that's why the challenge is so great, because we are required to meet that need. We want to meet that need. We want to give every child the best opportunity to achieve the very best outcomes possible. And so we are looking to spend this money as wisely as possible. Because we're in an overspend position, because we had an overspend of £9 million at the start of this year, and that is increasing, we're invited to join the Delivering Better Value programme that the government have introduced. One of 2 programmes, the other being Safety Valve, that you might have heard of, which is generally targeted at those with a bigger proportionate overspend than we have at the moment. Delivering Better Value focuses on looking at what we're doing with our money, how we're spending it, doing an analysis of that, and then putting in place actions that will support us in more effectively and efficiently meeting need, reducing need, meeting a need earlier, all those things that we want to do, and is in the SEND strategy that Councillor Codling mentioned earlier. So through DBV, we're doing things like reviewing how we fund SEND, the amount of money that goes for each type of SEND. We're looking at creating a commissioning function that will enable us to engage more effectively with the market where we have to, in order to stimulate capacity or procure placements at a cost that is affordable within the Heine's block generally, and all sorts of other projects and programs that are going on with the Delivering Better Value programme, which is set out in the papers attached. So, as I say, I'm not going to go through this in detail. There's a huge amount of information in front of you. I hope you had a chance to at least browse that, and all of us would be happy to answer questions about any of that detail.
Great, thank you. Susan, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I'm content just to take questions, really.
Great. Thank you very much. Councillor Bowick.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I was quite interested in the delivery plan, the DBV delivery plan, the DBV programme and strategy, and where you talk about measures of success. Now, I don't expect this document to have, the KPIs included, but they're pretty vague, aren't they? Measures of success. How will we know? Early years take-up data, and there's mentions of more hits on the website, things like that. I think we need to see a bit more clarity around how you're going to measure success.
If I could come back on that. As Councillor Codling said, the world of special educational needs and disabilities is a really complex and far-reaching world. It's really difficult to pinpoint any one action that we take and the impact that it has, because it's a multitude of actions across education, health and social care that need to be taken. I do take your the impact measures are, in some cases, they're not as precise as we'd like them to be, because there actually isn't a more a precise way of measuring the impact. But any one of those measures is not in itself going to make a difference. It's across the whole of the impact or the whole of the range of measures, rather, that we're measuring. But what I will say is that since this has been published, my team have continued to work to further refine the impact measures and the baseline data. So in part, I'm saying that it's really difficult to come up with very precise measures that tell you about whether that's had an effect, a positive effect for children. But we are doing our best to refine that over time, and it will take us a year or so to get, to work through all of that and get the right measures.
I have to say that I understand perfectly that we're talking about a complex undertaking here, but it's not the only complex undertaking in the world. I come from a background of telecommunications, it is equally as complex. Of course, how you feel about your telephone call is probably a lot more trivial compared with how you feel that your child has been looked after. But you do need precision if you're able to understand how successful you're being. You really do need that. So I'll move on. The other point that I wanted to talk about is, or want you to talk about is, there's a plank that runs through this, and it's all around the reduction of the HCPs. Now, laudable. Hope you can achieve that. You're not working in isolation, though, are you? Your parents are demanding. Their demands have increased year on year on year. I just wonder how confident you are that you can take those reasonably demanding, and really quite well-informed parents, how you can take them with you.
So, yes, that is wouldn't it be marvellous if we all understood how we do that? I think when we talk about reducing education, health and care plans, it's really important to be clear that we're only talking about reducing education, health and care plans where an education, health and care plan is not necessary to improve outcomes for that child, where we could and should be doing things at SEN support or in our mainstream schools to meet those children's needs. So that's the reduction that we're looking for, which would in and of itself is one of the indicators that we would use to demonstrate that we are meeting need at an earlier stage, which is in everyone's best interests, I think. Neil, do you want to come in with something else?
Well, to agree, but to say part of what we're trying to achieve here is to get confidence in the system. So there is from a parental perspective, if you feel the needs of your child are not being met in a mainstream setting, then absolutely you'd want to look for how you get the support that you think you need, and that would drive you through the statutory process of the HCP and those sorts of things. So we're doing a huge amount of work about creating early help services and supporting schools to be as inclusive as possible, and all those sorts of things. And if that's effective, parents will be confident that their child's needs are being met in that setting, which will consequently reduce the call on the HCPs. But as Susan says, we're absolutely clear that where any HCP is required, it needs to be in place, that it is in the HCP plan, so it's got a health element, social care element, other elements that come in around that, so it's an overarching assessment of needs of that child. And as we've all said, the system is complex, but what we need to do is make sure that each stage of that system and each interaction with a family has with the SEND system, they have confidence that they're getting what they need to identify need early, meet that need, manage that need within the setting that their child is in, or that there's a clear plan to escalate that where it's appropriate to do so. Like I say, I think confidence is really key in this, because there is no confidence, we move directly to the statutory process, and then that is costly and time consuming, and not always, but sometimes necessary.
Yeah.
Councillor Dick and then Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Let's begin positively. Self-help and early intervention are key for children, full stop. Actually for some adults as well, but let's talk about children. And so the resource that's been opened today, I'm pleased to hear about that. And there've been I was talking to some earlier about, there's been a lot of that work in West Berkshire. I applaud you for that. But I want to go back, because you're off the hook here on this measure, and you're really not. Either don't pretend that you're going to measure things, or put in some proper measures in your report, because the hardest things to measure are often the most important things to do, aren't they? And when my colleague talked about the reduction in certain plans, which are heavy and expensive, it's very simple, isn't it? We don't want to see that just so we've got a smaller number on the table. We want to see that because it means the quality of the work that we've done under the original plan is such that the child is making such progress that they're able to take more responsibility for their learning. That's what we want to see. So I'm sorry to be dull and boring and consistent like yesterday. It's about quality, and we need to be able to measure it. Thank you.
If I could, Chair, it may be helpful. This delivery plan does not contain the full detail of the impact measures and the qualitative and quantitative data that we will be using to assess progress. And there is a very detailed send data dashboard, which is in production. You know, once we finalised it for our data, we will be taking it across the partnership. It may be useful for me to come back at a later stage with the underlying data and with the impact measures, the baseline data that we've collected, and then how we've moved. Because I agree with you, we need to be able to quantify our success measures. I think my point was simply that for some things, it's really difficult to find the thing that tells you whether that's been successful, and it has to be across a multitude of measures, pulling them together. But I'm more than happy to come back with that full range of data. I don't have that available tonight, but at a later meeting, I can bring that and a demonstration of the SEND data dashboard, which this authority has, through the DBV programme, has prepared for the first time. There has been no measure of SEND activity previously.
Thank you. And it's worth mentioning that this item is going to be coming to scrutiny every 6 months.
Yes.
So that information could come to us then if it's not available before then. Thank you. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. I must admit, when it was announced that DBV was going to be undertaken delivering better value by this local authority, I was a little bit concerned because it was in the press quite a lot. So there was a very large article in the Guardian and in a sort of community support group called Special Needs Jungle. In fact, I'm looking at the page at the moment. Now, they seem to have gone rather quiet in that area, which I'm hoping is a good thing. I've got a couple of questions. So the Special Needs Jungle has tried to make it a bit simpler for people like myself, which does need to be, you know, from a high level. So they say each DBV scheme is split into 3 modules. Number 1 is hardcore number 1, which I believe is not a rude word at all. My kids have said that comes from a comedy show. Module 2 finds out what's driving the financial pressures and really doing a root cause analysis. And module 3 tries to develop solutions and those opportunities into action. So I think I've got 2 questions. Where do we think we are as a whole, as a local authority? Obviously, you'll have different work streams. I can see from your very comprehensive plan that things are going at different, but as a sort of a programme level, where do we think we're still in module 1, coming into 2, or even touching module 3? But it will also be good to understand for the local authorities that have been ahead of us by about a year. I think there's been a number who are ahead of it. What are they finding are the benefits to them, not only on a cost benefit, because that's a real worry. You say that to parents, are going, well, you're doing what? And all it does is chop money. We want actually to see what are the positive outcomes for us as a local authority, plus obviously for the people with SEND needs.
Thank you. So I didn't hear what the SEN Jungle said the first of the 3 phases were. Sorry, I got that it wasn't a rude word, but it was a word that's used.
poring over the data effectively, as they've
Yeah.
said there. Hardcore number one, I think.
Okay, a hardcore, sorry. Yes, so that stage has been completed, and I think driving the data is completed, and I would say probably, well, definitely actually, I would say we're in the developing solutions stage. So we're using this year with the DBV funding to enable us to develop our transformation plans in effect for SEND delivery and the support that we provide to children and families and to schools and to settings. And that's excuse me, those are the actions that are set out in the delivery plan. So it is phase 3. In terms of your second question, I think that's a really good question. There isn't an awful lot of cross local authority work directly related to DBV. It may be that that's something that Anne-Marie and myself can raise when we next meet with the DFE to see if they intend to bring together authorities. They haven't done a lot of that work. But I think it's a good point. We should all get together to talk. And I just wanted to say, just in terms of West Berkshire's approach to delivering better value, rather than focusing on the financial cost, what we are focusing on is improving services and outcomes for children, young people and their families. And our belief is that if you improve outcomes, if you get early intervention, if you get prevention right, if you have confidence from your families and confidence and trust of your schools, that you will reduce costs. It's not a quick fix. It never is. It won't be done in 1 year, 2 years. It is a medium to long-term plan. But for us, it is all about improving outcomes for children.
Thank you very much. I mean, that's somewhat reassuring, but it's not very reassuring that I'm assuming this is led by the Department for Education. The Department for Education isn't sending out a monthly win topics, and maybe this is the feedback we should be giving back to government is, come on guys, this should be front page news on whatever a Department for Education today is. So if we can give that feedback by whatever mechanism we do as a local authority, we want to start hearing some success stories from the programme as a whole now, because I think it's well embedded in a lot of authorities that have been leading on this.
I'm conscious that other authorities have invited the DFE regional director, if that's the correct job title, into scrutiny meetings. So it might be worth us thinking about inviting an external guest, maybe for the next time we discuss this in 6 months' time. So maybe that's something we can discuss with officers. Yeah, okay. But yeah, good suggestion, Councillor Reid, thank you. Any other questions? I've got quite a few, sorry. I noticed in the document, it mentioned that we'll probably have an accumulated deficit by March 25 of 15 million, but I also saw 20.9 million, which is the correct figure.
So this is obviously an evolving picture as we go through the year. And without wishing to go on a completely different subject, things like clawback will have an impact on that because that funding will increase the amount of funding that's available to meet the need. What was given the 20 million figure as a maximum, I think. I think it could be up to was where it was what was suggested. My understanding at the moment, I think the overspend for this year is 7 million ish. It's a developing picture. We're about to do Q2 monitoring, as you know, and we'll have a much more detailed picture at that point. And the outcome of the clawback will have an impact on that. And so through the budget monitoring process, but I would expect the overspend at the moment to be between about 7.5 million.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm conscious that we had some extra roles that came through as a result of delivering better value, and that they're relatively short-term roles and they're involved in various task groups. I was just wondering, and also it mentions having a restructure. I just wondered if you could give us a bit more information about why we think that restructure is necessary, what the long-term prospects are for these roles, and how the work of those task groups that you're involved on will be embedded. So if and when you depart from the authority, how can we be confident that that work will continue?
Thank you. So I'm going to take the very first part of that question and I'm going to hand it over to Neil, because I'm the transformational 1 year bit. My team and I, we're funded for 1 year to come into the local authority and support you and support colleagues, support us, really. I consider myself part of, well, I am part of it. And so we are here in part, various degrees up until the end of March, at the end of the financial year, when the Department for Education's funding ceases. We're working really closely with Neil and his team because it becomes core business then. So we're doing the transformational elements. It moves into core business, and Neil and his senior leadership team will take over responsibility for the continuation of the work set up by DBV. And Neil will talk to you now about why the restructure is necessary.
Yeah, so exactly as Susan said, DBV is coming and looking at everything that we're doing and looking at how we can improve our services to improve the outcomes as described. We need to shape ourselves differently to manage that. And if I take one example of that, one of the key findings I think that's going to come through DBV is an investment in commissioning services. We haven't had that commissioning resource in any meaningful way in the past. And so if I give you a very small example, if we're looking for an independent non-maintained special school placement for a child, at the moment, the SEND officer engages with the market individually and talks about that one child and that one need. If we're to change that, and commissioners are to engage with the market more generally and create frameworks in which we can call off placements that are quality assured, at the right price, at the right time, absolutely focused on the needs that we have, that role comes out of the SEND officer's role, who can then focus much more of their time on actually the assessment and their area of expertise, and the commissioners can do the work that they need to do. And so there needs to be a restructure that underpins that change, and it's quite fundamental to the way that we work. I think also West Berkshire is fortunate to have some really great services that support schools. And they've all got an acronym, and I won't go through them all here, but people might be aware of the EBSA, the Emotional Based School Avoidance Team, or TTST, which is Therapeutic Thinking Support Team, those sorts of things. And I think what DBV has given us an opportunity to do is step back and look at all of those and say, this is really great work. At an individual child basis, this is really good stuff. But actually, could we do it better overall? Is our offer to school coherent enough as a whole to make their support of children and inclusion as effective as it can be? And I think there are improvements that we can be made in there. So I think we need to restructure ourselves also to ensure there is a very coherent offer to schools that doesn't mean that there's lots of entry points. So they might have a discussion at the moment with the EBSA team or the TTST team or any of the other teams, when actually we could have one conversation that wraps around the care that the child needs, which is multifaceted and might come from organisations other than the council, whether that's third sector, health or others. That would be much more effective as well. So it's not just a case of moving teams around to create an efficiency. It's actually about working in a different way. And that's how DBV can be effective. DBV is about doing things quite differently, like I say, having the commissioning model and those sorts of things, and not just that slower pace of change that we might have, and other local authorities might have had the opportunity to do previously. So that's why a restructure is needed, to make sure, as Susan says, when the DBV team leave, we're set up to deliver in the way that has been co-produced with schools and parent groups and those sorts of things. And the offer is what we want the offer to be. So that's why the restructure is there. And I know, the challenge is always, well, a restructure is always the answer to fixing things. And we're absolutely clear that's not the case. This is led by how we want to work and the structure being changed to fit that, rather than changing the structure in order just to make changes to our delivery processes. So hopefully that's clear about why we're doing that. And it's also clear why we're not immediately going in today and putting in a structure. We're working with DBV. It will come in over time. It relies on us having commissioners. It relies on us having a joined up approach to things like mental health support in schools and those sorts of things. It relies on us working with health and others. And so it's quite a big job, and that's why it's going to take a little bit longer than just simply me moving the pieces around on a piece of paper and saying this is a different structure and that'll help the outcomes.
Thank you very much for that thorough explanation. It also mentions in the report that some of the schools have an inconsistent approach to exclusions. And it mentioned that one secondary school in particular has got a high level of, or higher level of exclusions. Are you able to expand a little bit on that? How can we make the approach of schools to exclusions a bit more consistent?
Yes, so this is the case in any local authority, particularly where you have academies, I have to say, and particularly where they're in academy chains, where they have different approaches to inclusion within their school setting. Okay, and the impact of that is felt differently across the system. And in some instances, as we have, that leads to quite big differentials in the use of exclusion, suspension, those sorts of things between the schools in the area. The challenge to us is, are we supporting and challenging schools enough on that? So if I was to go to a school and the head teacher was to say, you know, I'm having to make a permanent exclusion, my question is, what could we have done prior to that could have led to a different outcome for that child? And at the moment, as I say, I don't think we've got a coherent enough offer before that to make that challenge very strong, and particularly around things like alternative provision and other related behaviour, particularly based services. So I think we do have to be challenging, but we have to be challenged from a position of strength rather than a position of weakness. And what we're doing, we are being challenging. We are going and talking to those schools. We are going to understand why exclusions are so inconsistent and that one school's excluding, you know, twice as many pupils as any other school. But equally, in doing that, I'm having conversations about how could we have worked differently to support you not to make that decision. And that comes all the way back to delivering better value, which supports us in having those services to support schools. And like I say, we are challenging and we do challenge, and we have a team who absolutely challenge exclusions, but we need to challenge from a position of great strength. And that's what we're trying to deliver, so that we can say, we want to be supportive, we want to put in place services and offers that's going to help you not get to this position. But, you know, if schools or academy chains choose to operate in that way, then we can be challenging, say, you had the opportunity to work differently, you haven't taken that. Why? Finally, you know, the school that we're talking about here is an academy, and we would raise that with the department when we meet with them very regularly and say, look, we're concerned about this because this is out of sync with how West Berkshire wants to work as a local authority. And the concern is that other schools will see that as a model that we or West Berkshire is adopting, and that will spread, and when exclusions will increase, you know, even at an even greater. I'm not saying every school would do that, but there is always that risk that other schools take a similar approach and we end up with higher exclusions. So challenge, support and challenge, but challenge from a position of strength.
Thank you very much for that. It also mentions in the report about a review of pupil funding banding arrangements. Does that suggest that we might be changing the thresholds that we have for offering help to people?
I'll take that one. No, it's not about thresholds. It's about funding arrangements for pupils at both education, health and care plan threshold and at SEN support threshold. It really is about ensuring that we've got a fair, consistent and transparent system of funding, which unfortunately we don't currently have in West Berkshire. So it's about making sure we've got that so that schools understand what support is available and what funding will be following particular pupils and families understand. So everybody understands really, but it's really transparent and clear. But it's not about thresholds to support.
Okay, thank you very much. We have also discovered that we've lost quite a lot of educational psychologists. I think it's gone down from 11 full-time equivalent to 1.6. Are you able to elaborate on why that is and what prospect we have of recruiting back up to the original level?
Yeah, this is an unfortunate position that we're dealing with urgently, and it's the result of a range of factors. It's not one thing, as you would expect. So we have lost education psychologists to neighbouring authorities, and I should set the context really. So the role of education psychologist is in great demand nationally at the moment. There's a shortage of educational psychology capacity, and alongside that, education psychologists can work independently and trade directly with schools. And it's fair to say that that is a well recompensed way of working, and might become more attractive to some education psychologists than working directly for a local authority where there is much more statutory work and other things are much more regulated in a, this is directed would be better word for that. So that's the context in which we're working, is there are not enough education psychologists, and there's a really competitive market, and there is an alternative where an education psychologist can go out and work independently. And we've lost education psychologists to all of those things. So we've lost to neighbouring authorities, particularly Hampshire, I have to say. We've lost local authority, we've lost EPs to going to work independently, and we've had a number retire and other issues. All these things sort of came together at once in a very unfortunate timing that probably couldn't have been foreseen. I wasn't here, but prior to that, it would have been difficult to foresee that. What are we doing about it? So because of that, we have had to say to schools, we will not offer traded services this term. So in the autumn term, we won't be offering traded EP services. We simply don't have the resource to do that. And we'll be focusing on the statutory to work, which is really, really important. We've increased interim EP resource within the team. So I think we had about 3 full-time equivalent interim education psychologists, and we're looking to increase that. And I'd say that's not easy, because they're also in great demand, and it's also quite costly. So we are looking to do that, and we are recruiting. So we actually had an advert out, I think it finished last week. I'm really pleased to say we've had some interest, and we'll be looking to recruit. And that's why we're going to look at whether we can move back to a traded model early in the new year, if that resource can be brought into place. So it is a really challenging situation. The role of the EP is really, really important within the SEND system. I think there are things that we can do where other professionals can do things that historically have been left to an EP. I think we can use a specialist teaching colleagues and others who have experience in particular areas like autism and that sort of thing. And so some of the projects that we've had that have been led by EPs could actually be led by lead teachers and those sort of things going forward. But that doesn't take away from the fact that we have got a deficiency of EP capacity at the moment, and we are doing everything we can to deal with that. And I'm hopeful that over the course of the next 3 months, we will have better news on that.
Thank you. Yeah, I saw Councillor Codling's hand, and I'll come to you, Councillor Dick.
Yeah, just as an aside, the LGA actually gave some stats on Friday at a meeting I was at that said that currently we are only recruiting 200 students to train a year in the UK as EPs, and it takes 8 years to train, hence the shortage.
Thank you for that. Councillor Dick.
I mean, I hear all this, and it's unfortunate, it's an interesting word. It is one way, of course, of reducing the overspend in the high needs block, because if the applications for various levels of plan and support aren't processed by an ed psych, what are you going to do?
I don't think it's a way of reducing. I think it increases expenditure on the high needs block, because we will be taken to tribunal far more often, and parents.
You understand what I'm asking? Sorry, what I'm asking. Normally, an ed psych would be involved in the train before various plans are awarded and granted. Yeah. Yes, their report is critical. If they're not there to write it, what are we doing about that?
Well, what we're doing is making sure that is what the EP resource we have got is doing. So all of that interim resource, all of our full-time resource that we have, is focused on doing the statutory work to ensure we don't fall behind on the 20-week EHCP deadline. We've proactively said to schools, and I'd much rather not, but said to schools, we cannot trade this year, this term, because we simply don't have the capacity. So that's focused.
That's fine. Thank you. I understand. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Drummond.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Mr. Goddard, come back to the exclusions. Can we get involved in academies and exclusions?
We can, and we do. So we have what we currently call an education welfare team and an exclusions officer who speaks to any school, academy or otherwise, where an exclusion is being made to understand that. But clearly, all schools and head teachers have to make the right decisions for their schools based on what's the circumstances that they see. And sometimes that will lead to exclusion. So as I say, we do challenge. We particularly challenge if that exclusion relates to, say, a child in care or other vulnerable young person, where we would absolutely not wish an exclusion to be in place. But our powers to intervene are limited.
I mean, I heard about, I was speaking to a couple the other day, and I went for a walk in my ward, but not on the Nightingales. Let me just say that. They own their own house, 14-year-old boy. He was excluded from a local academy school. The appeal went on for 9.5 hours. I just can't believe that. I've never heard of one going on that long, because I was a governor for 20 years and just never, I don't know if that's a good use of school time, really.
I've never heard of such a thing either. So that would be very, very unusual. But you know, again, academies have the power to make.
I'll let you know at the meeting where it was.
That'd be very helpful. Thank you, Councillor.
Councillor Cotton.
Yeah, I think this is very worrying with the positions so low. I mean, and really, is there, obviously we're not being competitive on salaries. Is that, you know, if we, I know that you get into a game with Hampshire, maybe they got more money than we have. But we should be seriously reviewing the salaries. Maybe they're too low. Or is there no external agency, and I hate to suggest this because we're doing such a great job of reducing agency staff, but is there not a pool of contract people we can hire like we did with the planning staff? I mean, this is serious, and it really needs a sense of urgency to be put behind this. Are any of those suggestions valid, may I ask?
Absolutely. So as I said, we have had interim educational psychologists, and we're looking to appoint more. I have to say it's a very expensive way of delivering that service, but we've had to do it. Going back to Councillor Dick's question, we've got to focus on statutory. So that's what I'm doing. I'm expanding capacity urgently and working with local agencies to do that. But the pool is small, and the education psychologists that we work with quite often will offer us a day or 2 or 3 because they want to carry on with their independent work and other things that they do, which is absolutely understandable given, you know, wanting to have a breadth of experience within the work that they do. But it takes a lot over time to build up enough capacity to deal with it. And I just want to reassure you, I am concerned about this. We are dealing with it urgently. I am looking to bring in a principal education psychologist or a lead education psychologist who can work with the agencies and others to make sure we get the right quality of EP support in and the right capacity in. But it is a challenge for all local authorities, and it would be wrong for me to say that there's a simple answer to this, because there absolutely isn't.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I've just got 2 more questions, if I may. It says on page 23 that we wanted to have an annual review at transition, but this was rejected. But it is a statutory requirement. I just wondered if officers could expand upon that. It's quite concerning that there's a statutory requirement for something and that request by officers has been rejected.
So each education, health and care plan is reviewed annually. So children's needs change, we know that, and we need to adapt the EHCP to reflect their needs. That annual review is generally led by the school, and the school undertake a lot of that work. But we need to coordinate that. Sometimes we need to challenge that, sometimes we need to support it. And we simply don't have the capacity at the moment to do that. All of my Ascend officers are working on supporting the delivery of new EHCPs because of the demand on that. We have recently got sign off and found the budget to put in place interim support for annual reviews to ensure that we start to catch up and work on that. And through the budget process, there will be consideration of permanent resource within this area of work. But it is true that for a period of time, we've not been able to fulfil fully our statutory duty around annual reviews. But like I say, the interim resource that's coming in almost immediately will enable us to start that coordination work, but there's more that needs to be done. So it's around having the capacity, it's around having the identified budgets to enable that to happen. It is a concern of mine, and it's something I raised, you know, as quickly as I could, and I think we've got a solution to it.
Thank you. And a very last question from me. I'm conscious that we had a SEND inspection from Ofsted back in 2018. do we anticipate when we will next have such an inspection?
Thank you. We're currently on what you might call inspection alert. In fact, the department is, Anne-Marie Dodds in particular is anxious every Monday morning because she's on 2 inspection alerts. And so the SEND inspection is one of those. And then the ILACs, the independent inspection of children's social care, both are anticipated. And I am currently leading for Anne-Marie on preparation for the SEND inspection.
Okay, thank you very much, officers. All the best as and when that happens. Any final questions, colleagues? No, we've had quite a lengthy discussion about that, but I think it's important bearing in mind the financial challenge that this presents to the council. And I'm very grateful to Councillor Codling and to our officers for coming along this evening and giving such comprehensive answers. Thank you very much indeed. So as I mentioned earlier, we will be having this item every 6 months, which I think is a very good idea, bearing in mind how serious it is. And no doubt we will have another interesting discussion then. No vote is required on this, so we can move on. Item 10, COVID Recovery Task and Finish Group. Over to you, Councillor Dick.
Excuse me. Thank you, Chairman. I'm working on the assumption that our colleagues have read the report. It is a lengthy report. But what I wanted to do is just mention in particular a few of the key recommendations. I'm conscious of the fact there's only one other person from the group in the room, so I'm sure the chairman, who for it is she, will keep me straight. So, first of all, I'd like to thank the council for entrusting the group, our group, for this work, because I think it was really, really, really important. And I'd like to thank personally fellow members for working so hard, because they did, and to Gordon, who also worked very hard in producing this report. Overarching remark is there are 2 things that really struck us all. One was the dedication of West Berkshire staff. We didn't discover one who doesn't deserve that praise through the period. Obviously, a lot of people have moved on and so on and so forth, but real dedication and hard work. However, there's a consequence of that, and it's trauma. It was visible, it was obvious that some of the most capable officers that I could mention but won't, giving us evidence, it drew them back into a very dark period in their lives, which I guess we all suffered through the period of COVID, but actually I don't think we have any idea, unless we were working in an area where it mattered, any idea what they went through. So all credit there, and maybe at the back of my head somewhere in HR, I wonder what anybody's reached out and is just checking on people even today, because this is all very recent. So that's certainly key. Now the recommendations, and I just want to stress a few. This will take just a couple of minutes. The very first one is to do with, and we're asking that the chief executive reaches out to his counterpart in the NHS and makes contact, because we failed. Obviously, communication between the NHS and the council was significant, complex, daily, every minute, every second, conflicting, you know, any adjective you want to put, very complicated. We couldn't get a handle on it, even to the extent where when we asked somebody senior from health that we wanted even a brief report about this, they couldn't do it, they wouldn't do it. Oh, we could write something for you, but it'll take a month. It was quite extraordinary. I'm not criticizing them necessarily. There are many-headed hydra, but I think for the future, we need to be clear, a very high-level contact in this organisation to the appropriate body locally in the NHS. That's very important. Point number 2 is actually about key groups and community groups, and that's important for COVID or any other major crisis, because that's what this is about. It's trying to make sure, without wasting resource, because as we hear already today, we haven't got enough resource, without wasting resource too much, how much can we do sensibly to capture what we've learned to make our citizens and our council safer in the face of the next crisis, which no doubt will come. So one of the things that we learned was that we didn't really have good records and good communications with local groups. And there are all sorts worthy groups out there who do great things, and we didn't know who they were. And they didn't really know who we were in some circumstances as well. So that's really important. Going further down, point 4 was about HR and what happened in the council. The council was really good at discovering an item which didn't exist before, something that needed managing. I could go into it, but I won't. From vaccinations to grants to organisations, and they moved people around quite well. Invented new teams. People seemed to be very good at that, but obviously there were situations, I'll come back to it, where we needed a little bit of external help as well. So the teams were flexible. Nobody said, "But that's not my job," or "That's not my contract," and I've done my hours. There was great flexibility, and you know what? I think maybe there should be more. Even in normal circumstances, we were very effective in that, no question. Emergency support in the community, point 6. The voluntary sector again. How can we harness their abilities, their energies, and their contacts for future challenges? The problem is we don't have any record of who these people are. And of course, it changes rapidly. But there are people like parishes and other groups out there who we could tap into and regularly get a database, not of every name, but worthy names, people who do things and keep them on board. Item number 7, everybody has emergency processes in this building, including those that were in schools, but where are they? Where are they? Has someone gone around all the departments and said, "Show us what you did, show us your plan," not doing more work, just show us, and put it somewhere where it can be found so we don't invent the wheel again, in particular because there's been a big change of staff, big turnover of staff. Yeah. I'm moving along as quickly as I can. Item number 9, have we asked, well, I know we haven't, other local authorities, what did they learn? Did they do a review like this? I know there's a national one. Don't watch that space. I'm not sure that we're going to learn too much from that. But what about other local authorities? I think we should be sharing what we've done and asking them what they've done. There's no questions about that. Local business, going further down, point number 9. Point number 10, emergency plans are all over the place, but are they coordinated? Are they clear? And have we looked at them in the light of what we experienced through COVID? Part 4, and this is really big, I think, and it's unfortunate our colleagues have left, but it's about education, really big. So there are 2 support officers in West Berkshire Council to support education. I don't mean psychologists and people like that. I mean 2 officers who work with schools on buildings and development and so on. The sort of people, in fact, I don't think they're both full-time, are they? I think it's 1 3/4 or something, Gordon. But in any case, they couldn't cope. They were highly regarded, not always before, but they were during that period. And then there was an opportunity there. If schools are to be a focus again, and they certainly were, or should have been more in COVID, no question. It's a national problem, isn't it? The damage that has been done to children, whether they have special needs or not. There's an awful lag there. I don't think the country's ever going to catch it up. So we needed to be clear about that. Point number 12, schools did all sorts of things. The council gave them as much help as they could, but everything was changing every day and schools made it up as they went along. And schools are good at that, I believe, some better than others. So, for example, bubbles. Anybody who's got children or knows people who've got children heard about bubbles. Sorts of different combinations of things are going on, and schools have done it. Nobody's ever gone to them and said, "Show me what you did. What was good and what didn't work and what could we have done better to help you?" Nobody's ever done it. And so all that expertise out there is going to dissipate unless somebody grabs hold of schools quickly and drags that in. And that's really, really, really important, I think. And the last point under education I want to mention is 14, and that's about educational welfare. And we heard a little bit about that today and last evening. This is about staff who assist in attendance. Attendance in schools today in West Berkshire, in the country, but that doesn't make it any better, is disastrous. It's disastrous. There's a whole cohort of children who stop coming to school, and probably other people who may not know this. Any parent can write a 2-line letter, it's on the internet, it's literally 2 lines, send it to the school, the child doesn't go to school ever again, and there's no checks on them. Now, that's been the case for a long time, but the numbers have been very, very small. But they are big now. So there's that for a start. So there are children who we have no real touch on, and a much bigger number are children whose attendance is very poor. They got out of the habit of coming to school. Some parents thought it was dangerous to send, some parents wanted to keep their children. You can imagine. So attendance in school is poor. It's not recovered. And I've talked to a number of schools about this. It's a disastrous worry for them. And I cannot, as a former head, cannot, what's the word, stress to you enough how damaging it is for a child to miss. So 90% attendance, people say, that's good. Well, it isn't, because that's half a day a week. If you missed half a day a week of your work, you'd be looking for a new job. Okay, so the attendance is really, really poor, and we should have put more resources into education welfare at the time. Okay, we were under pressure, but I think we should be putting more in today, because we're nowhere near getting back to where we were, and the world wasn't perfect then. And we all know about children, the longer these patterns become established, and in some families, the harder it will be ever to break them. Going on into the care sector, point number 17, and this was really good for us to hear, and this is my last point, that I think you said this actually, Paul, that it was a mess, wasn't it? There was daily instructions from Downing Street or other places, often conflicting, let's march forward, let's march back. It was very difficult for everybody, but the council, when it thought appropriate, challenged the government and said, no, we're not going to do that. We are confident in our own abilities. And one of the examples was moving people out of hospital willy-nilly with COVID and putting them into care homes. So the council, no, we're not going to do that. So the council did very, very well, we believe, in lots of ways, but those are the holes, and some of those will remain unopened. And it's kind of surprising, but actually people want to forget. They want to forget, but we forget at our peril. So I commend this report to you on behalf of the group. What have I missed, Chair?
Right. No, very, very comprehensive. Thank you very much. And thank you to Councillor Dick for chairing this task and finish group, and to all of the members who were involved, the officers, particularly to Gordon, as Councillor Dick said, and also to all of the external guests and previous members of staff who came back. And it was quite moving, and it was very clear that it had quite an impact on people. So we were grateful that they were happy to come back and share.
May I ask that one last thing? There was one thing, and I think this applies across the council, and a number of people said this. The council isn't always as good as it might be at looking through the other end of the telescope. So we did things to the best of our ability. We thought they were right. Were we sure that the people at the other end who were looking back up at the council felt the same? Because that's a really good learning opportunity. I think, although the council witnesses, which is why you've reminded me, were really, really good, I think when we're doing work like this, we need to have more external, if you like, council users, council service users to be involved. You listen to what they have to say, you put appropriate weight on it, of course, but you need to hear it.
Thank you. Questions, Councillor Cotton?
A question for our Chief Executive Officer, if he's still with us. Yes, I can see. I'm just. How can we take this review and put it in like an emergency handbook, so that it will be available in 3 years' time, for example? I might not be here, you might not be here. Where can we put this as a valued document and say, okay, if this happens again to such a severe consequence like mpox or the bird flu that seems to be bouncing around all over the place, I think Councillor Dick is correct. This will happen again. Where can we put this in our systems so it can be found? And let's maybe a touch arrogant and go to the chief executive officers and say, hey, guys, we did this. Would this, is this of interest to you? Even go one up. Let's go to the central government and say, we've done this. Have you got somebody relevant there who's actually paying attention? And this may be of use from the coalface. So basically, over to you, Nigel.
Can I just say we will have a vote on this and it will go to executive. It will be up to executive whether or not they accept the recommendations. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we need to make sure we're better at logging long-term recommendations and going back to them. So this is an example of where we could go back in the future, assuming the executive accept them and ask the question, have they been implemented? Sorry, Mr. Lynn, would you like to say something?
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a very good question. And I'd have to say I don't have exactly the answer now, but just for you to be aware, from an emergency planning point of view, we obviously work across the whole of Berkshire. And we have an emergency planning team that works across the whole of Berkshire. We happen to employ them. Carolyn Richardson is one of our employees that leads on that, obviously. And within the emergency planning documentation side of it, we have documents that are stored on banks that we have access to as and when we need them. So if something were to happen at AWE, for example, we have documentation that's within there that we've got access to. So my first thought is that we need to set up something around a sort of COVID documentation side of things so that we can quickly go into it and remind ourselves of lessons learned and what we can do to be better, etc. And just to pick up on one of the other points that Councillor Dick mentioned earlier was about the link with our health colleagues. I think the relationship with the health colleagues, probably since the formation of the local boards, has vastly improved in the last 2 or 3 years. And none of that was set up, obviously, pre-COVID or during COVID. So I regularly meet with counterparts in the health service now, and within the hospital trusts, etc. also. So I would like to think that we'd have a much better day-to-day dialogue with those colleagues than we had during COVID. Now, obviously, I wasn't at West Berkshire during COVID, I was elsewhere, but I do agree that the relationship with the health authority at the time was very difficult. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lynn. Any other comments? Yeah, Councillor Bowick.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Dick. I was involved in 2 areas during COVID: children, young people, and education, and of course my ward. And I was interested in the point the point that you drew out about contacts and capacity and so on and so forth. What my perception is that there was a huge range of capacity and competence across the district. I think that, and I don't claim any credit for this because I wasn't involved in this aspect, but the parishes and the benefice and some other charities in my ward worked really effectively, and we had feedback from council about that. They didn't have to worry too much about what was going in Aldermaston. Now, I guess my thoughts are, how do you kind of replicate that? And how do you maintain that capacity? Because we know, don't we, that no plan withstands contact with the enemy. And we might have done really well, relatively speaking, during COVID, but how well will we do in the next one? Because people will have moved on and so on. So I guess it's how do we maintain the quality, the capacity in the organisation?
Well, I mean, our job was to make recommendations of what should be done, not to go down to the detail of how to do it.
Yeah.
But it's very simple to begin, isn't it? Is all these worthy people. Don't worry about Aldermaston, by the way. We should put that in a plan. The ward member says it's going to be okay.
Now, but it'll change.
But we need to develop a database of the people you're talking about in Aldermaston or everywhere else, and then somebody needs to maintain that. That's as simple as that. Then you've got someone to start with. It's simple. Life's simple.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I know in my ward, it wasn't necessarily the parish councils that were coordinating this work. It was a lot of volunteers that came forward. We had more people who wanted to help than people who needed the help. And I know that there are certain people from that time who are carrying on with community cafes. They put little adverts in the local magazine saying, I'm still here if you need my support. So I think just trying to gather that information together would be really good. Mr. Coe, I saw your hand, and then Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this paper came to corporate board, and I offered to bring a couple of items forward from corporate board. So first, of course, recognise the enormous amount of work that's gone into this. Corporate board's very pleased to see the report. Huge amount of useful information within it. A couple of proposals, just a couple of minor comments back. So on recommendation 15 about PPE, we just wanted to make the point that this has an expiry date. So what some of our plans have to. So whilst it would have been great to have a massive stock at exactly the moment when we needed it, in reality, because we can't predict when it's going to happen, then the expiry piece is something to factor into how we land that recommendation. The only other one that caused some sort of reflection was proposal 8, which was about it was partly because the Berkshire Prosperity Board at the time didn't exist, and so therefore something about what are the mechanisms going to be when we need them in order to harmonise things. So I think it's fine to say the Prosperity Board or equivalent bodies in terms of coordinating some of these mechanisms.
So we could add in Berkshire Prosperity Board or alternative mechanisms. Yeah, I think that would probably be an acceptable addition to make. Yeah. Okay, Councillor Reid.
Yes, I'd just like to add my voice and commending this report. It's a piece of work. It's certainly not an area of expertise directly, although I do work in operational resilience, risk management, and in crisis management, but in financial services. So, however, this has become more intolerable, more focused, actually. The government is interested that people can get access to cash, for example, especially, for example, if you're an old age pensioner, you've only got £300 in your account and you can't get access to that during cold snap and you need your boiler repaired, because that would result in probably intolerable harm. And I think that's one of the things that comes out of this is we need to have that ability to respond to prevent intolerable harm to the most vulnerable. And that needs to be the centre of any such plan or recovery plan that we've got, response plan, I should say, rather than recovery plan. I've also got in front of me the Cabinet Office's latest, and it is the latest since 2003, National Risk Register. And guess what's top centre with 5 to 25% risk with a catastrophic impact, but pandemic. So it's going to happen again. We're an increasing population density country, as is the world. Again, the only thing I can say is on the experiences I find is, yes, you do get a huge turnover of people, and I notice when we do testing, is when you get that turnover of people, that's when you get poor decisions being made, or they've completely forgotten about the plan. You can actually print it out in front of them, put it on the table, give them the scenario, and say, right, the exercise now starts. They all look blankly at each other, and no one reaches across to get to the plan. Can I suggest that when you do training, or we do training, or new officers come in, part of that training is to be aware of the plan. They need to read it. They need to understand what their roles and responsibility is. And I should also recommend a level of scenario testing within the council. It doesn't have to be extensive. It can just be a simple walkthrough of the plans you've got, tick list stuff, or even just a desktop scenario for a couple of hours, which makes it fun. And then you actually take those lessons learned from that and observations from that, and you build it into your crisis management plan. And so that's something that's actually come strongly from the financial services, which I think is lessons learned from emergency services and NHS. So maybe it's turned for those lessons to come round back to.
Is there a particular recommendation that you would like to add that under?
I think it's. Let me just have a look at the. I think it could just be just a highlight of the report to recommend that we do a degree of scenario testing. I would say a recommendation at least once a year, that new senior, middle management to senior management are made aware of all the plans that are available. And that they're also, because if people move on, that they have delegates and those
That's
people.
the word induction and ongoing training. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
other than that, a superb piece of work. Superb.
Great. So if we could add in about induction and training and people reading documents when they first come to the council to familiarise themselves. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions, comments? No. Is everyone happy with all of the contents, all of the recommendations? Yep, great. My thanks again to Councillor Dick and the members and the officers and the guests and to Gordon. Fantastic piece of work. Do I have a proposer, please? Councillor Bowick, seconder, Councillor Reid. Thank you. All those in favour? That's everyone. Great. Thank you very much indeed, everybody. So that will now go to executive for them to consider all of the recommendations. Do we know when that's likely to be?
I don't have a timescale off the top of my head, but I'll liaise with the monitoring officer and get back to you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Wonderful. Right, moving on to item 11. Well, thank you for your patience, members. I'm conscious of the time. Just go back to the electronic agenda. So appointment of task and finish group. So as you're aware, we have established a sports hub task and finish group. We've got a membership of that. We want to have a pre-briefing before we get going because there's a lot of documentation to read around this. And I know that Mr. Oliver has been trying to find a date for that. So can I encourage members of that task and finish group to respond to Gordon? Let's get that task and finish group briefing underway, and then we can crack on with the actual task and finish group itself.
Sorry, Chairman. So we got it a long time ago, didn't we? Should we still be holding on to that, or is it gone?
We couldn't find one that everybody could make, so if I could grab everybody before they leave today,
yeah,
and we'll get something in the diary.
That'd be good. So my recollection, Councillor Dick has kindly volunteered. Glutton for punishment, another task and finish group. Yeah. Councillor Cottam, Councillor Reid, yes, and myself, and who else is coming from Conservative group? I don't think I've heard from anybody else. And David. Okay.
I'll just.
Okay, great. And David Marsh as well. So initially we'd thought that we needed to have political proportionality according to the size of the different groups, but I've since been informed that we don't have to do that. So I've decided that it'd be best to have 2 people from each group. So if we can definitely have another Conservative, I think that would be very good. So we've got 2 from the minority group and 2 from the Liberal Democrats. Good. So let's crack on and get that date in the diary. We've also got here the terms of reference for the project management task and finish group.
Sorry, Chair.
Hello.
I did have my hand up.
Beg your pardon, Howard, I couldn't see you.
Very picky, but my title at the time was portfolio of housing, culture, leisure and sport.
Right, thank you very much for that correction.
No problem.
Right, okay, so do you have any comments on the draft terms of reference for the project management task and finish group members? Okay. Councillor Reid has kindly volunteered to chair this. So if members are content with that. Yep, fantastic, very good. And we will need some volunteers to be on that. We won't begin the work on this until the Sports Hub one is complete because we don't have the officer capacity to run 2 at the same time. So it will be back to back. But if you could talk to your groups, please let Gordon and myself know as soon as possible who would like to volunteer for that. I do need to mention one thing. Initially, we'd had a concern from the member of the public about the Faraday Road procurement exercise, getting Faraday Road back up and running again. And as you'll recall from a previous item, we'd decided that we'd do the care director, the I-Trent and the Faraday Road as one. But we've had subsequent discussions, and because the Faraday Road is about procurement as opposed to project management, we thought it would be sensible to deal with Faraday Road separately. But can I ask for a vote from members, please? Because we had a vote last time to do them all together. So I think it's only correct that we have a vote, if you are in agreement, that we deal with it separately. The bonus of it being dealt with separately is that that member of the public with concerns will get a response more quickly. If it had been part of the project management task and finish, they would not get a response probably until next summer, by the time we've had that group and completed the report and come back like Councillor Dick has this evening with the recommendations. Councillor Reid.
A little bit concerned that in order to get the project management to be able to give something feedback to the executive plus the leadership of the council, is we need a good sample set. So 3 projects would have been good. I'm not saying that Faraday Road would have been a good example of it, but, you know, having not been involved with that. So it concerns me that we'll go down to effectively 2 projects we'll look at, which may not be a good sample set to be able to provide anything meaningful, because we just might end up with 2 really bad ones, 2 really good ones. There are obviously ones that we're concerned about. So I don't know if there's another opportunity to add into scope for, if we're taking Faraday Road out and doing it separately, to add another, you know, project one into scope to be investigated.
Okay.
So we've got a good sample set.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I suppose the counter argument to that is that if we add more projects, it's going to lengthen the amount of time it takes to go through it. But I am happy if members want to have a think about whether there are other projects that they think ought to go in the mix.
Sorry, Chairman. I'm happy to take your advice because you're going to be chairing it, aren't you? And it's your background more than mine.
Yeah, so maybe we can, if the vote is to take Faraday Road out of scope, my recommendation is that we maybe do an offline piece of work to bring another project into scope of the project management one, so that we have something suitable, which could be maybe leave it to leadership or even to the CEO to select one that they think has concerned them in the past and maybe needed just a second view now that, you know, things have calmed down and various other bits and pieces, and we can genuinely learn lessons from them. Maybe that's a thought.
Okay, yeah, point taken. Thank you, Councillor Reid. Are we content to have the Faraday Road separately? Councillor Cotton.
My understanding is we were looking as a perspective of project management, and it was an overarching look at how we did things and did we do them properly. Is that, no, so...
That will be an element of it, yeah. So session 1 in the agenda pack talks about how we manage projects. So that would be a more generic look at projects. And then sessions 2 and 3 would be about care director. And then session 4 and 5 would be about I-Trent, the HR project. So we would look at it generically, but we would also have the 2 examples that we'd do a deep dive on.
So, but at the moment you're saying it's the sports hub, and so I'm a little confused. I thought we were looking at overarching systems and how we approached it rather than the individual item as it is. Sorry.
So we've got a sports hub task and finish group, which is going to start imminently. That's separate.
Right.
Yeah. And then this project management task and finish group is due to look at care director and I-Trent. And initially we said it was going to look at the Faraday Road procurement issue as well. So we need to decide whether or not to take out Faraday Road procurement from the project management task and finish, and then add something in as Councillor Reid suggests, something else in. Councillor Bowick.
I think that the fact that a member of the public has asked for this specifically to be looked at, I think you're absolutely right, Chair, that we should pull it out of the project management group, and I certainly would be happy to support that.
Okay.
Indeed, I'll propose that if you like. And I think that Councillor Reid's point about adding in another project to that to the project management task and finish group is sound. I think we should perhaps take that away and identify something or not.
Yeah.
And then would we bring it back?
Yes, and we've got time. We've got plenty of time to do that because we wouldn't be starting this until the new year anyway. Yeah, yeah.
And I think your concern, Jeremy, was that Faraday Road wouldn't be looked at. Actually, it would be looked at as a separate item.
Yes, so it'd be a separate item at a scrutiny meeting. So it'd literally just be a single item responding to the member of the public's concerns around procurement.
But yeah, I think when we had the original debate, it was that Faraday Road needed that extra task and finish oversight. I think that was our concern.
Well, I saw it as the bigger picture. I thought it was, and that was part of this secondary group where we're looking at the systems. The IT systems, I think, was one of them. But it was just how we do things. You're probably better. Your thoughts on this are accept, but I thought that we were looking at that Faraday Road as part of that, as a pertinent example. Maybe I'm wrong.
The sports hub task and finish group will be looking at elements of Faraday Road by definition, because one of the issues that it will look at is whether or not the sports hub was a replacement for Faraday Road. So Faraday Road will not be absent from the sports hub task and finish group discussion. Regarding your point about looking more generically at projects, that will be done as part of the project management task and finish group. So session 1 in this task and finish group paper that we're looking at now talks about how we manage projects in West Berkshire. So it looks at structure, resources, training, methodology, governance arrangements, common reasons for project failure, learning lessons, contract management, legal challenges, etc. in the first session, but then a deep dive into the other two, Care Director and Trent. So it'd be a combination of looking at general lessons learned, but also those two projects, and indeed a third project, which we can decide in due course, because we've got 3 or 4 months to decide that. Yeah, Councillor Boat.
It seems to me that we will have that bigger picture view. In fact, arguably, it's even bigger.
Okay.
Councillor Reid, it was his initial idea, so if you're content with that, I'm prepared to go along with that.
Okay, great. So can we take a vote on the Faraday Road issue? Councillor Bowick, you proposed content with having it separately. Any seconder to that?
I've had the
Councillor Dick. Okay, all right. Can we have a vote on that? So we take Faraday Road as a separate item. So just to clarify, this will come to a meeting imminently, probably November, December time, and it will be a single item on the agenda addressing the member of the public's concerns. So all those in favour of removing that and having it as a separate item? Okay, all those against that proposal? Any abstentions? Thank you. Right, so we've agreed that we will deal with that separately. And then on the issue of the terms of reference that we have for the project management task and finish group in front of us, we have already had a vote that we're going to have the task and finish group. So this is the terms of reference. I don't think we need to have a vote on the terms of reference, but if members want to add anything or take anything away from that, we'll take on board Councillor Reid's point about coming up with a third project. But are there any other comments on those terms of reference? No? Okay, great. Thank you very much, members. So yeah, as I said earlier, those who are on the Sports Hub, if you can get back to Gordon about the suggested meeting dates, that would be fabulous. Good. Right. Moving on, health scrutiny update from Councillor Vickers. So I will read this out to you. And this is just to note, the committee brought together key partners to look at adult mental health and suicide prevention at our meeting on the 23rd of September. Reports and presentations were provided by Public Health, the Buckinghamshire, Oxfordshire and Berkshire West Integrated Care Board, Berkshire Healthcare NHS Foundation Trust, and the chair of the Mental Health Action Group. Comprehensive information was provided by stakeholders in relation to initiatives, services provided and local needs. Members noted the great deal of work carried out by Public Health and health partners in relation to mental health and suicide prevention. A number of particular areas were highlighted, questions were answered, and recommendations will be reviewed and shared shortly. In addition, there were updates provided by the Integrated Care Board on their emerging winter plan and by Healthwatch West Berkshire on their work plan. The terms of reference for a task and finish group looking at children's mental health and emotional well-being were reviewed and approved. The task group is looking for 5 members and the work will begin in coming months. The work programme of the Health Scrutiny Committee for 24-25 has been finalised and is reviewed regularly. The key items planned for the agenda at the next Health Scrutiny Committee on the 10th of December include access to primary care and the relocation of Eastfield House surgery. Councillor Vickers, I understand, is being proposed as a full member of Scrutiny Commission imminently. It may even be at full council this week, which I think will be wonderful. And she will be present at meetings in the future. So whilst we have these written reports at the moment, we will have the opportunity to ask her as chairman of that committee anything that we'd like to ask at that time. Thank you very much, members. Executive forward plan. Any comments on this, please? I'd just like to say there's something on care homes on the 7th of November for executive. And as members will recall, there was a public consultation where they talked about handing over care homes and then decided not to. So I think it would be quite useful if we could get a bit of a heads up on what the contents of that paper might be, because I don't think we'll be having another ordinary scrutiny committee meeting until after executive have considered that paper. So if you could, Mr. Coe, give us a bit of a heads up on that, that would be great.
How would you like that, Chair? I can give you a bit of an update right now if it would be helpful verbally, or if you want something else, I will be happy to do so.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to say something now, that would be great. Yep, thank you.
Okay, so the approach at the moment is we've published a tender for Birchwood and Willow's Edge, with the idea that an external independent provider will take over the operations of those 2 care homes. The tender is now closed. The evaluation is next week. So the paper that comes to executive will essentially be a recommendation relating to whether to proceed with that external provider taking over those 2, a selected external provider taking over those 2 care homes.
Okay.
So I can see some hands.
Thank you. So procedurally, Mr. Gordon, would I be correct that if we wanted to look at this at scrutiny, the only option available to us would be to call it in after that decision, after that paper's gone to executive, in order to have a say, should we wish to do so? It may be that the commission doesn't want to. Would that be? Yeah, that would be right. Okay. Any questions for Mr. Coe on what he's just said? No? Okay. Paul, if you're able to give us a bit more flesh on the bones and send us an email, I think that would be really valuable. And then members will have an opportunity to have a think about it. Sorry, I beg your pardon, Howard.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure where we are on the agenda, to be honest, but I can see in the list of things to do, Kathleen Bogos is still there, and sadly, he's no longer with us.
Yes, point taken. Thank you for that. Mr. Lynn, I can see your hand.
Yes, Chair, you recall I sent you an email the other day that corporate leadership team looked at the forward plan for scrutiny. We made some suggestions that you may want to think about. We were looking at the sort of main value of risk across the organisation, and we put some suggestions forward under public health, adult social care, under place, under people, children's services in particular. So we looked at fostering, general safeguarding, child protection and court procedures, and in resources and health scrutiny as well. So we made a number of suggestions that the committee may want to consider.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lynn. And Mr. Gordon has very helpfully gone through your list. I came back to you with an initial response. Some of the items we have looked at already, for example, fostering, mental health for adults and children is going to be considered by Health Scrutiny Committee imminently, and similarly maternal mental health and emotional mental health. It says here also CAMS is going to be considered by a Health Scrutiny Committee task group. There are some things that you've mentioned in that list that we haven't got anything planned for, so we can certainly look at that. And there are also some elements of that document that I think we need a little bit more flesh on the bones. So it says under place, effective working with our communities and partner organisations. So I think it would be good to get a bit more information from senior management about what they mean by that. Facilitating growth could probably go to PAG. Business development, we haven't got anything planned on that at the moment. Housing is something that the Health and Wellbeing Board is already looking at, and a report is going to corporate board. So I will come back to you again on that, Mr. Lynn, if that's okay. I'll show you the list that Gordon has helpfully produced, and maybe give us a bit more feedback on some of those items. That would be helpful.
Yeah, that's fine. If Mr. Oliver could go to the relevant ED, but they're just suggestions for you to consider, and they are concerned about the overall value of some of the work we do as well. Thank you.
Okay. Do you want to elaborate on that, about the value of what we do?
Well, if you consider the children's services you've been looking at tonight, you know, the costs to the council and the amount of money we spend on working with children in need, for example, is a phenomenal amount. And, you know, that means that we need to consider how the Scrutiny Commission can help us make sure we do that as efficiently and as well as possible. And, you know, it's large numbers involved. So there's bigger risks to the council and bigger amounts of money involved. So that's what we've tried to think about with some of those cases.
Yeah, great, thank you. It's worth mentioning as well that we are going to be looking at attainment of children on free school meals compared to all children. And I think that's on the agenda for November or January. And yes, we will be looking at the special educational needs and disabilities every 6 months, which I think is absolutely essential, bearing in mind the challenge that faces the council in terms of its finances. Thank you, Mr. Lynn. Any other comments from members about the executive forward plan? No. Okay, thank you. Scrutiny Commission work programme. Do colleagues have any comments on that? I know we've talked about housing in the past. I did have a conversation with Councillor Gaines, who's portfolio holder for housing, last week. And Health and Wellbeing Board, as I mentioned, is going to be looking at that as well. And a report is going to corporate board. But there's obviously a lot of issues around housing that are of concern. There's homelessness, there's empty homes and what we do about them. The issue of helping to provide housing for refugees. I think probably, I don't know about other members, but I have found it quite difficult to get engagement with Sovereign when people have come to me with concerns. That's improved slightly recently, but only because I've managed to find somebody who's been extremely helpful. And now I bombard the poor person concerned with all of the inquiries. So again, it's an example maybe of getting an external provider in to Scrutiny like we did with the police. Maybe we could ask Sovereign and other providers to come in and answer our questions. And as a result of that conversation, we might be able to get a bit more information about who we should be going to and who will give us quicker answers as ward members.
Could I suggest we
Councillor Reid.
Could I suggest we bring in the biggest 3 in the area?
Yeah, I think that would be very sensible. Yeah. Councillor Wollaston and then Councillor Drummond.
I think it's slightly embarrassing that we have flooding having no portfolio holder or lead member. And I think it should be Councillor Gawley.
It is Councillor Gawley, yes. He will be coming to the Scrutiny Commission meeting on the 17th of October when Thames Water and the Environment Agency are coming along, and he and John Winstanley will be presenting the Section 19 report on last winter's flooding. So yeah, you're correct, it's Councillor Gawley. Councillor Drummond.
I would just like to add that Sovereign House is the best of a bad bunch. And that's pretty sad to say, really. There's a lot worse than Sovereign. Thank you.
Because we've got AA Dominion. Who are the others? A2, beg your pardon, A2 Dominion. Yeah. Yeah. So we need to have a bit of a think then about which ones to bring in. Yeah. Okay. And I will continue the conversation with Councillor Gaines and also with Martha and Health and Wellbeing Board, because obviously we don't want to all be looking at everything simultaneously. So we'll try and come up with a sensible way of doing that. Any other comments on the work programme, colleagues? No. I think the other thing is looking at transformation. We heard this evening about delivering better value. and the fact that that's a transformation project and there are other things that are going on. I think it would probably be good to hear from Gabrielle Mancini soon about how that's going. If members are content to have a look at that as well. Maybe we could ask for a single item agenda. Yeah. Okay. Wonderful. Right, that brings us to the end of the business, I believe. Thank you very much for your fortitude, members. I think we've had a very, very interesting and in-depth meeting. I'm grateful to all the officers who've come along as well. Anyone watching at home, I hope you found it very interesting and you're becoming fans of the scrutiny process. And we will be meeting again on the 17th of October for Thames Water and the Environment Agency, and also looking at the Section 19 report that the council have drafted, and also the emergency response to the flooding as well, which is very timely, bearing in mind the bad weather we've had in the last few days. So with that, I will draw the meeting to a close and thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Chairman. Well done.